This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for December 2nd, 2020. And we're operating at a remote participation, and I need to start off by reading about provisions of the open meeting law. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission on December 2nd, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by recording on demand on the Harwich Channel 18 website or on our Town of Harwich YouTube page. So welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you all had as good a Thanksgiving holiday as possible last week. And so the first item on the agenda is a presentation and possible vote related to two requests for letters of support related to purchases by the Harwich Conservation Trust. So I guess I'll ask Mike Locke to present those concepts to us.
Thanks, Brad. And, members of the Conservation Commission and Conservation Administrator Amy Wazowski for organizing this presentation before your commission. So my name is Michael Locke. I serve as Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust. Also present as part of this presentation is Mark Robinson, Executive Director of the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, which is a nonprofit land trust service center working on behalf of Harwich Conservation Trust, facilitating these two proposed land donations. So thank you for your time reviewing these two land donation opportunities, which can be completed with the help of your vote to send a letter of support to the selectmen recommending that the selectmen approve both conservation restrictions. The proposed land donations and conservation restrictions are connected to a 3.5-acre property in East Harwich within the Pleasant Bay watershed. That 3.5-acre parcel is owned by Judith Miller. And there's also a 6.65-acre property located northwest of Hinckley's Pond, owned by Jacob S. Brown II. Both properties are located 100% within a Zone 2 wellhead protection area for the town's public drinking water supply, serving thousands of drinking water wells, households, that tap into those municipal wells for their drinking water supply. Both properties are adjacent to existing conservation land and therefore offer open space connectivity. Both properties offer important habitat for a variety of wildlife to forage, nest, and shelter. Because of these conservation values, each property donor is eligible for a state conservation land tax credit of up to $75,000. The state conservation land tax credit program requires that an incorporated entity accept the land donation. The Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust is incorporated and will accept the land donations on behalf of the Harwich Conservation Trust. The Compact will later transfer land ownership title to Harwich Conservation Trust. The conservation restrictions you have before you will be granted to Arenda Wildlife Land Trust. Granting of those conservation restrictions satisfies the state's conservation land tax credit program requirement that each land donation receives permanent protection. The conservation restrictions that you have before you are modeled on the state standard conservation restriction language, similar to conservation restrictions you've reviewed and approved in the recent past. In order for the land to be permanently protected by these conservation restrictions, each conservation restriction needs to be approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Before they're sent to the state for the Secretary's approval, they need to be reviewed and approved by the Selectmen. These conservation restrictions are up for review at the December 7th Board of Selectmen meeting. Therefore, we seek a vote by your Conservation Commission to send a letter of support recommending the Selectmen approve and sign each conservation restriction. So Mark Robinson and I are glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. All right, let's see. Amy, any comments you have on this?
I would just recommend that you support both of these donations by writing a letter of support to the Board of Selectmen. And that's about it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'll ask each commissioner if they have any comments, and then we'll entertain a motion on both requests at the same time. Let's see, John, do you want to start?
Sure. I have no questions. My only comment is I support this.
All right, thank you. Stan?
Same comments as John.
Carolyn?
Same thoughts.
All right, Jim?
Yeah, I'm entirely supportive. I appreciate the donations.
Okay, and Ernie? You're still muted, Ernie.
Does that work?
Yep.
Right on? Okay.
Yep, you're on.
Amy, how many pieces of land do we have with conservation restrictions on them? Do you know?
How many pieces do we have as the town conservation?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. Most properties that we have acquired have a restriction on them, and that's usually, it's just a double protection. But I don't know.
What's your responsibility? Okay, what's your responsibility for these pieces of property?
These two, I would have none, because these two, the restriction is being, the commission and myself would have no responsibility to these, because Arenda Wildlife Land Trust is the holder of the conservation restriction, as opposed to us. They're just one of the steps that you have to go through in this process is to get selectmen support for this. So you are simply recommending to the selectmen that this is a good idea to put these, to allow for the donation and restriction of these properties.
Okay, so there's no obligation on our resources for you, right?
No, correct.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I'm good, thank you.
All right, thanks, Ernie. And Mike, or Mark, I just have a quick question on Arenda Wildlife Land Trust. I don't know if we've seen them before in one of the transactions. Is this anything different? Do they have any different role, or is it just an opportunity to, apply their services?
Mark, do you want to comment on Arenda's role here and the assignment of the CR?
Yes, hi, Mark Robinson, the Executive Director of the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, and I serve as an advisor both to the Harwich Conservation Trust and to the Arenda Wildlife Land Trust, and have for many years. Arenda is centered in Barnstable. They're providing this service of holding the restriction on a temporary basis. As soon as the compact transfers title into the Harwich Conservation Trust, the Arenda Wildlife Land Trust will assign their responsibilities under the conservation restriction to the compact. And that's how it will play down through time.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a comment, Larry?
Thank you, Brad. And Mike, it's a great proposal. My question is regarding the tax write-off. That's beneficial to the owners of the property. Does this also take it off our property tax rolls for taxation purposes locally?
Yes, the land is being donated to the Harwich, my organization, the Compact, which is a 501c3 tax exempt, as is the Harwich Conservation Trust.
So I think that's important to note that it's actually a donation from the town as well. It's not it's not free. It's worthwhile. We should point that out, I think.
All right, thanks,
generous
Larry.
people.
Yes. Okay, any comments from members of the audience, or Amy?
Brad, I think, so I don't know if you got Mark Coleman, he's on.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got a lot of folks on tonight. Okay, Mark, did you have any comments?
I do not. I have no remarks. I support this as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, my screen's got a crack, and I think your space is covered by the crack, Mark, so we won't go into why it has a crack. Okay, and any other comments from members of the audience? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we provide a support letter from the Harwich Conservation Commission to the Board of Selectmen recommending and supporting this transaction for both 36 Proprietary Way and 5 Lady Slipper Lane. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second that, Brad. It's Stan.
All right, seconded by Stan. So we'll do a roll call, and all those in favor say aye. And I'll start with you, Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Thank you all very much. Very much appreciate your time and your support.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a request for determination of applicability for 11 Hiawatha Road, map 6, parcel G5-2. It's a proposal to remove an existing dwelling, garage, and hardscape and septic system and construct a new flood compliant dwelling with deck, hardscape, utilities, and Title V septic. Do we have a representative here tonight?
Yes, Dan Croto from Moran Engineering. I'm here, and the contractor also, at least when there were less people online, I saw his name up here also for questions on the procedure of the build, if there are any. So we're here in support of Andrew and Karen Plotner, the owners of the property. It's a remove the existing single-family home and construct a new single-family home. It's a 1950 house in Howardsport. It's in the upper reaches of the 100-year floodplain. It's, I guess, it's 4 houses back from Nantucket Sound in Howardsport on Hiawatha Road. And so the proposal is, as I said, remove the existing house, construct a new house. The building coverage, actually, which is building coverage as in the town bylaw, zoning bylaw, and with the roof, that gets under this proposal is slightly reduced. The site coverage would match, which site coverage being hardscape, deck, and the building coverage would remain the same. And this is, there's a zoning compliance chart. That was because I used the same plan for the Conservation Commission as we submitted to Board of Appeals. Zoning Board of Appeals, because it doesn't meet the existing house or the new house or any house wouldn't meet the required setbacks of the new zoning put on these old lots. So that the Zoning Board of Appeals will see this next week, and then the Board of Health also has to see this in 2 weeks. One improvement created by this is that we can bring the septic system up to current code and get it the right distance above groundwater. And so other than that, we're just looking for the commission to agree that it doesn't impact the resource, the floodplain resource being in the outer limits of it. It's a floodplain 12, and the property goes from 11.5 down to 7 at the driveway. The driveway isn't going to change. The area that is going to be filled is around the house and in front of the house, so that we can put a raised septic system in, as a lot of places with the high groundwater need. So a comparable amount of fill to what someone would need if they were just redoing a septic and needed a wall and to fill in the wall. With that, I guess I'll just ask for the commission's questions.
Okay, thank you. First, I'll ask if Amy has any comments for us on this.
The only comments is that this will be a flood compliant structure now, and the septic system is new, which will provide better removal of any nutrients. And the building coverage is decreasing slightly. Site coverage is remaining the same. I would recommend approval of the project with a -2 determination, which is that work will take place within a resource area, flood zone, but will not have an adverse impact to that area, with the condition that roof runoff go into dry wells, and that any grass is composed of a native Cape Cod seed mix, and that there is not to be any chemicals such as fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides within the floodplain.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, we'll go through to the different commissioners and see if they have any questions or comments. I'll start with you, Mark.
No, actually, I don't have any questions on this. I would agree with Amy.
Good, thanks. John?
I just have one question. I'm just trying to read the plan here and looking at the retaining wall. And it says in the corner there, retaining wall, 5-foot max height at about the place where the elevation contour is 8 feet. And if you had 5 feet above that, that would be 13 feet, but the top of foundation is at 11.4 feet. So I just don't quite get that. Is there really going to be a high retaining wall there, or are you giving yourself 2 or 3 or 4 feet of margin there for the retaining wall?
The proposed house is, the existing house is that 11.4, so then the proposed is 13.1, because the floodplain is 12. It still is probably a 4-foot wall. I think originally when I put that on, I wasn't sure what the garage slab was going to be at, but it's the highest grade is 11, and then it looks like the lowest elevation is 7, so it's more like a 4-foot wall. So that note is slightly conservative.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't read thoroughly. I see the top of elevation. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
All right, thanks, John. Stan?
No questions.
Okay, Carolyn?
Amy, did you mention no permanent irrigation system in that location? In conditions?
I mean, we're not within the 100-foot buffer to a wetland. We're in the floodplain, so it is with the commission. I wasn't going to make a recommendation one way or another on it. I don't particularly see the harm in an irrigation system in the floodplain as long as they're not putting down chemicals.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either, especially on such a small piece of property. It won't, I don't see any harm, but I was just wondering if that was part of what we were going to list. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
Yeah, just to clarify the verbiage there, it's not just chemicals, but also fertilizers, right, of any kind. So that's my only comment.
All right, Arnie.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So the question right now, is the house currently on a slab?
Crawl space.
Crawl space. You're going to be putting a full basement in underneath it?
The garage is going to be a slab at grade on two sides, and then that same level we brought across. But correct, there'll be a partial basement, because any basement, any foundation wall needs to be 20 feet from the septic system in front. So there will be partial basement in back. But it's at grade at the garage and on the east side, floodplain regulations is how that works.
You can't,
okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you can't have utilities before, below floodplain level. And
Only storage and building access and parking of cars in the flood level. So there wouldn't be.
So not living space.
Not living space and not utilities, correct.
Oh, okay, because you had mentioned, Dan, that the driveway doesn't change, but actually it does because it's going down.
Right, yeah, it stays level from the south side towards the house where it's existing 7 and it's going to be brought across 7. I guess it goes down about a foot from what's there now.
Just a foot?
Just about a foot, yeah. And
well, okay. All right, it looks like it would be more than that based on the terrain, but okay, I'm fine. I have no other questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, any questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, seeing none, does one of the members want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 11 Hiawatha Road for the removal of the dwelling, garage, hardscape, and septic for a new flood compliant dwelling with deck, hardscape, utilities, and a new septic with the conditions that we stipulated.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay.
All right, seconded by John, and we'll do a roll call for voting. All those in favor say aye, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
Ernie had to step out for a moment.
Okay. Myself, Brad Chase, aye. So we're going to call that a unanimous vote.
That would actually be 6. No, let's not wait. He texted me. He should be back shortly, hopefully. That would be 6 in favor and 1 in favor and 1 abstention.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
sounds good, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 1 Wawa Tacey Road, map 6, parcel F2-1. It's a proposed rock revetment, reconstruction, and sand access ramp. Do we have a representative here tonight?
Yes, Don from Coastal Engineering. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hope every, just a ditto on what Brad said earlier. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Thank you for hearing our project tonight. This was previously approved to basically take the existing rock that's out in front of the existing revetment and place it against the existing revetment. But this also came in front of you under an emergency order to make a quick repair in an area where the revetment actually collapsed, which is relatively close to the existing stairway. That repair was done, but at the same time, there's been some photos that the owner sent. That area is further collapsed and in further problems. So what we talked with Amy about was filing this particular plan as a revision or an amendment to the first plan to actually make the access down over the actual revetment, because it's going to be all taken apart, mainly because the material behind is completely being sucked out because of just the design and how old the revetment is. There isn't any filter cloth behind it. And then rather than take the rock that's out in front and just place it onto the face of the existing revetment, use all of that rock in the reconstruction so that we can make it a more proper style points out revetment that we're most confident with. And that's what we show in section view. So this is a plan to show the change in access by creating a ramp, as you see on the plan view, and by changing the profile view of the project so that you can see that we'll be building a traditional points out style rock revetment. We did include the vegetation along the top, which is going to be replaced, and we itemized that in the notes. I believe that was part of the first filing, Amy, if I'm not mistaken, when Catherine presented it before. So we plan on doing the same thing. The plants are listed, the distances are listed, and we do it certainly under the observation and guidance of Amy, your agent. We do have a situation now where we do really need to get this approved and rebuilt, because the existing revetment is only going to continue to fail because the material is being lost from behind it. And the house is very close to the top of the bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, do you have any summary comments on that one?
As Don said, they received a permit for similar work in 2019. So that permit is valid until 2022. We did issue the emergency when we had the collapse of one of the main boulders in the wall over the summer, and allowed for the filling of that. Since that time, I did send the photo around that was, Don, you had forwarded to me from the Kriegers, showing that in this past storm that we had the exacerbation, we can say, of the destruction of the wall has occurred. It looks like you definitely had some more erosion from underneath and the slumping, but due to the high rain events and the fact, the work that you had to do for emergency essentially kind of nuded the top. You had some top-down issues as well there. So the majority of the project is similar to what you approved before, in that they're removing the rock from the beach, going to use it to rebuild the new revetment. This revetment is actually going to be slightly farther landward than was originally proposed. This would result in a slightly wider coastal beach than you previously had. I put both the proposed and what you approved previously for you in Dropbox so you can compare those things. It was helpful for me. The wall would connect to others on either side. This is a coastal bank. The planting area on top has remained the same that they're proposing from before. They would like to access the site via the top of the bank. So there's a little access ramp road that they're going to use, which they're going to essentially work from the bottom up. And then they are willing to do some beach nourishment, which I would encourage. What you get when you have rock or any type of really coastal engineered structure and you don't do beach nourishment, yes, it does tend to wash away, but at least it does somewhat replace what you would naturally come out of a bank. And if you don't do something like that, you will see maybe exacerbated erosion, beach level drop, which is less of a coastal beach area, more wave action, etc. So I don't have that calculation tonight, but if this project gets approved with the beach nourishment, which we allow nourishment above the high tide line, which there's really not much room here anyways. I'll have that number for you, what would naturally erode here on an annual basis. I'll have that for you at your order of conditions discussion in 2 weeks if you move towards approval tonight. So, and I did want to state that I had some conversations with the association, and they just want to make sure that they're involved in the process, that they're at the start work meeting, that everything goes through them. And I mean, that's really, I mean, I can put in the conditions, but it is kind of more of a, you know, neighbor and civil matter. But hopefully the homeowner is welcome to that as well. And there may be a few of those people, Mr. Chairman, on the line after the commissioner's comment. But those are my comments. I would recommend approval of the project with some nourishment.
All right, thank you. And Amy, the nourishment would be for the life of this order, right?
And potentially longer, as a it would kind of fall under maintenance. It's just a nice thing to do. And oftentimes these people are in an area where it's fairly easy for the town to, if we have excess sand when we do dredging, to get it to this area. We don't always have excess sand, and it is case by case basis. But sand can also come from, you know, inlet or other sources as well. So. Okay. All right. So we should all keep that in mind.
Yeah, sorry, Brad, through the chair. Note 10 has our calculation for beach nourishment.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. You can check it over and see if you come up with the same numbers. We have an initial amount when the construction's complete of 70 cubic yards, and I suggest we probably put it on the face of the revetment, so if waves come up, it'll take the sand away rather than place it right on the beach. That way it'll last a little longer. Correct. And then also we have a yearly annual nourishment calculation of 34 cubic yards based on the height of the bank and the length and the erosion rates. You can check that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But then that's how you calculate it, is length times height times annual erosion rate. So.
Okay, well, we've got that calculation there in the plans that we're going to view tonight, and I would just ask the commissioners to consider, you know, the pros and cons of having a limitation on the duration, or just having this as a maintenance activity that continues on to the future. So I'll start with comments and questions from the commissioners with Mark.
There you go. I pretty well agree with what Amy had to say when she did her assessment. I do have some concern about other involvement and that being part of the order of conditions. There's some question in my mind if that's actually any of our business. And I'd like to hear a little more about that.
All right, thanks, Mark. John.
Yeah, it seems to me like this is something that needs to be done. And like Mark, I don't quite understand what the role of Conservation Commission is in terms of addressing the concerns in that letter. So I would like some clarification on that.
Okay, Stan.
Can you clarify something for me? Because this original revetment failed over time. And then you made the comment the new construction should avoid the problems of the erosion going behind it and everything. But then we talk about the sand nourishment afterwards as something that's kind of necessary to prevent future problems but I'm just trying to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stan. You want to wait till the end, Brad, just write notes down and answer them, or as we go?
I think for that one, why not answer now?
Yeah, sure.
It's a good
Stan,
one.
yeah, the nourishment functions on two levels. One is because we're blocking the sediment source to the beach by the revetment, we have to provide that natural sand that would ordinarily erode if the revetment weren't there. The other reason we want the nourishment, which we always want, is to make sure that the beach elevation stays above the toe stones. So the toe stones in this location are going to be well below grade, but adding sand to keep them covered, they're the foundation of the whole revetment. The new designs with the filter cloth behind, with double layering the 600 Marathi, it tends to have like a almost 35 to 40 year lifespan. So you won't lose material from behind, which is what's happening with the revetment now. So the nourishment is just to protect the elevation of the beach, which protects the toe stones from becoming undermined.
Okay, so just one other question. I don't know if maybe Amy, was the owner previously nourishing this beach with the revetment or not?
Maybe the owner's on and they can speak to that. I don't know if it was an annual thing or, when the sand became available type deal, but I think the Kriegers are on.
Yeah, hi, I'm Doug. We used to get a certain, next to the public beach at the end of Wawatasi. So when that gets renourished, in some years there's enough so it sort of naturally falls towards our beach. One year we did pay for it, and there was enough for about, I don't know, about a year, maybe two. And we're also hoping by moving the rocks, there'll be more of a natural flow of nourishment as well, which we see as a plus. And we've talked about putting beach grass down on the sand level closest to the beach. And that should also, we want to have that built out over time. So.
Okay, one last comment, and then I'll let you move on. But didn't we say that the nourishment should take place annually here with the new wall revetment?
Yes.
Regardless, so whether the sand is available from the town or has to be paid for, is that a requirement then?
It will be in your order.
It should be in our order. So I before I came to Harwich, I worked on the Outer Cape towns, which in Eastham, the Outer Cape towns experience much more, they have much higher coastal banks, they have higher erosion rates. They deal with this more than Harwich does. So they do require annual nourishment in order, nobody says it's perfect, but annual nourishment somewhat contributes what would naturally come out of a bank and nourish the coastal beach, below the intertidal, the sand flats, all that. Without that, you get the beach lowering and issues there. So my recommendation, this is a pretty coastal bank. The yardage isn't very much, but the property is pretty small. I mean, over time, they might see some real benefit from this. So I would recommend in this case that it is an annual nourishment requirement.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Amy. I guess that's all my question, other than to also comment what John and Mark said about, I don't think it's under our responsibility to get others involved in this, or we shouldn't be involved with that.
Can I address that real quick before we go on, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Amy.
So the only responsibility we have as a commission is any project that comes in front of the Conservation Commission, we have to really put a good faith or effort into making sure that a project is not going to have an adverse impact to abutting properties. So if that means, the abutting property is the association. If that means, making sure, putting it in the ordinance that they're invited to meetings, if it's a way to give people some assurance, then I don't see an issue with it. I mean, our only responsibility is making sure that this isn't going to have an adverse impact. In my opinion, it's going to be seamless with the other adjacent revetments. You're actually going to gain potentially some more coastal beach because you're removing the stones that are actually on the coastal beach and putting them up. Sand nourishment is a plus. So in my mind, from the performance standards, I think they've met all the performance standards for coastal bank and coastal beach, and there will not be an adverse impact. But if it's not really, if it helps to put it in the, if it helps to help facilitate between the homeowner and the association, I mean, we can put it in the order, or I'm just happy to help with that. So.
Through the chair, can I add to that?
Sure, Don.
I think the Kriegers are very interested in making sure that it's seamless between the two revetments on either side. So I've had two contractors that I've worked with that will be looking at bidding a job that know how to knit a rough-faced wall to a smooth-faced wall. Because the two on either side are smooth-faced, they're still, the way that this one is existing, those are still going to be smooth-faced. So we need a contractor that has had experience in knitting two walls together, especially two different types of walls. So I've had already two contractors look at it, and they're totally capable of making sure that it's knitted properly between the two revetments. And I think that might be what the neighbors are concerned about, because the nourishment and the plantings all do address the performance standards. So we are providing something that wasn't there before that will address the performance standards. It talks about not affecting downdrift beaches. So the nourishment is more, yes, we're putting it on our wall. Yes, it keeps the beach elevation up, but a lot of that sand will end up moving in the littoral system, which is neighbors. So I think we've kind of are cognizant of it and trying to make sure that the Kriegers who want to do the right thing will end up with a sound engineered project.
Okay, let me move on to comments from the commissioners. Carolyn, do you have any?
Yes, I have a question. Sometimes when we condition something in our orders of condition, it's absolved, goes away when they get their certificate of compliance. Sometimes, such as in fertilization, we require it to stay in perpetuity, remaining with the property. Is this nourishment the requirement for nourishment going to end with the certificate of compliance, or continue no matter who owns the home? And in the second regarding the change of ownership, I don't think it's our place to tell the owner of that house how well they have to get along with their next door neighbors.
Good point.
My suggestion is that this is an in perpetuity thing. If in the future, this owner or future owner, for some reason, is that all this sand is having a negative impact on the resource area and it's too much, we can readdress it. But this would be in perpetuity. And that's typically how a lot of, like I said, other towns with bigger banks mostly and bigger revetments deal with it.
Okay, thank you, Amy. That answers it. But when we were there today, it looked to me at high tide like there was 6-8 inches of water at high tide. There was no beach. So I can understand the nourishment behind the revetment, but nourishing the sand on that beach looks to me like it's just going to float down to the association or float out to sea.
Through the chair?
Yeah,
that does make sense, Carolyn, and that is probably going to happen over time. But if it's annual, then we'll be putting down the sand that would be based on the formulas that DEP issued to address that. But we are moving this whole rock revetment landward, so to try to establish more of a beach. So the toe that you see there now that gets inundated by a tidal event, especially one where it was generated by high wind today, we'll be back away from that during this kind of episode that we had today. Major storm events, of course, it's going to get hit pretty hard, but so does the whole coastline. So it will have a tendency to move sand, but that happens along the whole shoreline. So what the idea is taking the rocks that are on the beach that are causing a massive amount of turbulence between the smooth face wall and the back of that rock structure that's not serving any purpose except to exacerbate the turbulence, which is causing more sand to disappear than it should. It should be a naturally graded beach so that when waves hit it, it's not being churned up more than it should be under natural circumstances. And that rock in front is causing an issue. And I think when we remove that, we're going to see, and with moving the revetment back landward, I think we're going to see a better beach out there.
Thank you, Don. That's all I have to say.
All right, next we have Jim.
Yeah, I don't have any further comments at this time.
Okay, Ernie, you're up.
Yeah, I apologize for missing the beginning of this presentation, but I have a few questions on this. The first one, Amy, what is the age of the dwelling on the property?
I don't know the age of the dwelling on this property. I didn't, I mean, this one's been rebuilt, I'm sure, but I didn't look at that because there's an existing revetment there and they're putting a revetment back. So I didn't look at the age of the building for this one.
All right, because I think that will be material going forward.
May I interject there, Ernie? It doesn't matter. There's an existing structure that's licensed and permitted. So all we're doing is rebuilding it in kind. It doesn't, so that the pre-78 status does not come into play, but I think the Kriegers are on, and I think they could probably tell us how old the building is that they've owned for a number of years. Are you still on, Doug?
33 years. Yeah, we rebuilt it in
We bought the property in, I believe, 87 or 88. And we rebuilt it when we moved there in 2000.
Yeah, so 20 years.
And we have done things all in the 33 years that we've owned.
And it's actually the last 2 years, for the first time, we saw anything happen to that revetment. And we are also cognizant of the fact that our neighbors to the west it's a public beach and it's all our neighbors. So we certainly want to be good neighbors, and it's nice to be able to walk through private beaches to get up and down, as a lot of people do. So we don't want to have it flooded all the time.
Sure. The reason I asked the question is obviously because prior to 1978, if the structure existed, then it would have some grandfathered protections available to it.
Yeah, but that's only if there's no revetment already, Ernie. We can check because they said they bought it in 1987, 88. So that means that there was a house there that they bought. So we can.
Understood, Don.
Yeah. So
but here's where my question's going, Don. Yep. Is, I mean, there's essentially three different categories, as I would term them, of dealing with this revetment. One would be to create a reconstruction of the revetment. Probably prior to that would be a modification of the revetment. And third would be a new structure entirely. I mean, what you're proposing to do would be to put the revetment in a new place, create a new slope, have a new face on the revetment, and have a new height on the revetment. So in my mind, it's of the three of those, I would say you're creating a new structure here.
That's okay.
You categorized it.
That's great.
I mean, you categorized it as a reconstruction, but I mean, you're taking out the entire revetment and basically creating a new landward of where this one is. You're creating a new structure here.
We do that all up and down the Cape, Ernie. All down in Wellfleet, Eastham. I think even Amy has been involved with many projects down in Eastham where there's existing rock revetments that have to be rebuilt. And whether they're rebuilt 2 feet, 5 feet, or 6 feet landward, there's existing structures that are being rebuilt. So,
all right, well, that's an issue in my mind as to how we're going to categorize this thing. And I think, you know, all the commissioners have to weigh in on whether they feel this fits one of those 3 categories that I've outlined here. Because I think based on the age of the structure, it'll have a potential implication to it. If the structure doesn't...
I did quickly check that on our assessor's database, and there was a structure on this property. I don't know the exact footprint, but there was a structure on this property in 1925.
So we're all set.
Good.
We're all
That's
set.
helpful. That's good. Okay. So how will this change the distance from the structure that exists today to the top of the bank? How far back are you moving it, Don?
You're muted, Don.
Don, I can't hear you. You're still muted, Don.
I'm not sure exactly, but I believe it's on the order of 10 feet.
All right.
So the homeowner's willing to move it back, to give back a resource area, which is coastal beach, and make it closer to the home. But because of the design, we're confident that it's not going to jeopardize the home.
All right. You make a comment in your write-up here, too, that the existing structure causes wave reflection that affects the toe of the revetment. Does it actually do that?
The existing revetment that's now, because it's smooth-faced, it does allow for some wave runup, but because of the grade of the face, it reflects more energy than it absorbs energy. And then given the rocks that are in front of that revetment, when those waves reflect, then they bounce off of the wall in front of it back towards the existing revetment. So it's getting, you know, damage, if you will. And so if we remove the rock that's in front, then there'll be a graded beach in front of it. And if we point out design, that absorbs energy more than it reflects energy because of the pore spaces between the rocks. It's not going to be.
But is it affecting the toe of the existing revetment, Don?
Not so much, no, because the beach seems to be relatively stable in height, but because the water is hitting it now, like Carolyn noticed today, that it's probably dropped, and it probably drops seasonally, so it is affecting it in some way.
All right. I wish these pages were numbered. You mentioned here that under the standards under the Harwich wetland regulations, under standards subparagraph B, you said that the commission should also presume that a coastal bank is significant to storm damage prevention and flood control, yada, yada, yada. But it says, this showing may include, but not limited to, studies of bank composition, erosion rates, destination of eroded materials, and historical data. I haven't seen any of that evidence in any of the material you submitted to us.
Is that referring to erosion rate?
I believe it is, yep.
That's on the plan, note number 10. The historical erosion rate is developed by the CZM transects that we use to get the yearly erosion rate. Then we use that rate based on what DEP has shown us as the formula of length times length of wall times height of wall times the established erosion rate by the historical records established by CZM. And that's on our note 10.
All right. Okay, I'll look at that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned on the next page, you talk about coastal banks significant to storm damage prevention or flood control, that the bank is not found to be significant to storm damage prevention or flood control because it supplies sediment to a coastal beach. Have we established that this is providing any sort of sediment?
There's no,
I thought,
in its current state, because of the fact that it's been compromised, it probably could be adding small amounts of sediment, but because it's been a rock revetment for years, since the 80s, there really hasn't been any sediment coming out of that bank till just recently since the failure.
Typically it is
Just by
below
nature, the fact that it's a flat-faced wall that's filled with concrete in between the cracks, so it doesn't. So its whole purpose is to keep sediment from coming out from behind it. So that's what it's been doing for years.
In a worst case scenario, it could give some sediment because the floodplain is all the way up, over and over the wall. So technically it could, but it is designed not to.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis.
Right. Good
and
point.
the new one will not either, right? Is that right? Or will it?
It won't. It won't allow sediment out. That's what the filter cloth does. But because of the fact that DEP and the town is looking for additional sand that should be placed in front of a wall, since this is a reconstruction, then the commission has every right to put down an amount based on the erosion rates that's required annually to replace the sediment that hasn't been being placed for whatever number of years.
All right. You use that term reconstruction again, and I still can't necessarily agree with you on that.
Fine.
Okay. So we're going to raise the elevation of the wall about a foot, you say?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So that's going to impact the vegetation at the top of the bank then too, right?
The vegetation during the emergency order was removed completely because the original plan that you approved that's still intact, hasn't been filed a COC, that all was going to be removed and replaced with new vegetation that's in the notes on the plan that we carried forward. So the intent is to replace all that vegetation with a more conducive top of bank type of vegetation to stop runoff from coming over the top.
Okay.
We're also raising the top, Ernie, because that's a great question. We're raising the top of the revetment so that we can make the grade on the backyard slope back towards the house slightly. And then with planting, then there'll be like a swale to keep the water from running over the top.
Good. Okay. All right. Good. So I guess that's all that I have in with respect to the questions. But you know, I would appreciate feedback from the other commissioners on whether they see how they would categorize this as far as a reconstruction, modification, or new structure.
Thank you, Ernie. Very good comments, and I think we can come back to that after people mull that over a little bit. I'm going to defer my comments for a moment and ask for comments from members of the audience right now.
Just to remind people, if you are on a phone and want to make comments, you have to hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey, Amy, it's Ed Doherty. I'm here with Ellen Broussard. She's the current president of the WBT. So we have a few questions about staging. How, you know, it seems like there's not a contractor on board, but Coastal has been speaking with one. How are they going to need to be on our property to do any of this project?
Through the chair?
Yes, sir.
When you say your property, Brendan, do you mean, I guess you have to describe what you mean by your property, because we are going to have to access through the landing that's right next to the Krieger's house. And then all the staging is going to be in their backyard. So I'm not sure what you mean by on your property.
Oh, excuse me, Don. I'm on my son's computer, and my name is Ed Doherty.
Oh, okay,
So,
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
This one just got notoriety.
Yeah. Our property, meaning the Windermere Beach Trust property. So our association encompasses about 50 members, and
yep.
I'm the past president. You know, I was involved with when this process went through in 2016, I believe. So I'm just keeping Ellen up to speed. So the WBT property at the end of Hiawatha Road.
Oh, okay.
That abuts the Krieger's property.
Yep, and you have a stairway over there?
We have a stairway, yes.
Yep. So we're not gonna, the only thing that we have to do in association with your property would be that we would have to make sure that we knit the two walls together at the property line so that there's a continuous protection and not left open, so that there's end scour created on either property, either your property or the Krieger's property. So right now it's knit together because they're both smooth faced and,
right.
And it's seamless. So knitting together will be similar to what you see, but right at the seam where they join, there'll be a rough faced wall that starts on the Krieger's, and then yours will remain as a smooth face, but we'll make sure that any rock that we take out of the wall gets placed back so that it's locked and keyed together, as opposed to just stacked on top of one another.
Right. So I have some experience with digging and dirt, and my biggest concern is once you start picking away at an old wall, it seems like the Kriegers are going to end up with a new wall, and we're going to be disturbing some soil behind the Windermere Beach Trust wall. What are the guarantees that, you know, in a year from now, things don't start sliding? I mean, 2 years ago, we got a administrative permit to recap our wall because, you know, things were moving. So we poured some new concrete up top. Everything seems to be fine. There are some cracks.
Yeah.
I'll admit there are, you know, our wall is not in great shape. We have cracks and we have some vegetation coming through it, but we're really not looking to have some real catastrophic failure. And I just want to say, you know, we want to be good neighbors to the Kriegers. Like, you know, I saw what happened after the last storm. I mean, the yard's falling into Nantucket Sound. So,
yeah,
you know, we don't want to, we just have to make sure that, you know, our membership is protected. And
yeah, okay, so what if we do this? Like, since we have all the members listening, why don't we stop the Krieger's reconstruction 10 feet from the property line, and then the knitting will take place on the Krieger's property, and your wall will remain unmoved.
Yeah.
Would that help?
That would help. I believe that would be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so you know, Ed, your wall is similarly constructed because it was probably constructed all about the same time.
Yeah, that I can tell you when that wall was built. It was built in 1973 at the end of Hiawatha Road.
Yeah. So what the Kriegers are facing is typical of the old 70s. There probably was some filter cloth, honestly, because they had this white fibrous material that they used to use under walls that I actually worked in the 70s on some of the walls, but that deteriorates and just falls apart, even though it's a smooth face wall, it's covered, just because of the water and the rain and all that, it doesn't last. So you're probably seeing the beginning of things will not be associated with the reconstruction of the Kriegers, but just based on the length of time and the age of the wall itself. But we'll stay 10 feet off of it so that you're more assured that we're not upsetting your wall
with our construction.
Okay. So does Coastal or the contractor, are they going to take any pre-construction pictures, do like a pre-construction survey? And will we get a copy? I mean, we're really looking to be in the loop.
Yes, there's no reason why we can't, because you're direct abutters through either just us working with you or through Amy. We can provide you with, yes, there'll be pre-construction photos because that's in the construction protocol. It's required. We have a pre-survey, which actually we got a portion of your wall surveyed on the Krieger's plan, just so we would know where that is in relation to, the property lines. And so when we finish the wall, there'll be an as-built, and we can provide you with a copy of that as well.
That would work. So getting back to the property line, are you going to reestablish that property line? I know it was established in 2016. Is that going back in?
We'll definitely have to stake the property line. The contractor won't even start the work until we get a property line staked, because they don't want to go on someone else's property without permission. And since we're hearing from you now, we should address your concern right now, and we will stake it, and then we'll make sure they're 10 feet off of that.
Okay. So getting back to the nourishment. So there was a report from Jim O'Connell, Coastal Advisories.
Yep, I know Jim. Sure.
Yeah. So on page 3, they were talking about like 36 cubic yards of nourishment in front of this wall. So is that like this season when, if you get approval to do this, this is something you're going to do right away? And where will the nourishment come from? I'm just curious.
Sure. Well, certainly the Kriegers would want to try to get on the list of people to get dredge spoils, but because we're building this rock revetment, they're going to be required, based on the commission's order of conditions, to provide annual nourishment. So that'll have to come from an upland source, and it'll have to be grain sized to match the beach grains that are on the beach existing. And there's plenty of pits that we get materials from, and we'll probably have to supply Amy with a sieve analysis of the material that comes in, and that 36 cubic yards would be placed annually, but after the wall is built. But I do want to make a note that in our plan on note 10, we're providing 70, I think it's 75 cubic yards initially before we get into the annual nourishment, only because that once we take the wall apart, we think we're going to have to beef up the amount of sand that's there now, because of even Carolyn's noticing that the beach is relatively low at this time. And since it's going to be built during the winter, the 36 cubic yards wouldn't be really appropriate right after construction. The doubling it almost makes more sense from the science.
Annually, typically nourishment takes place in the late winter or early spring. Most people like to do the nourishment, and again, it would be on the face of the revetment, not necessarily, on the beach, so it'll drop down eventually. That usually takes place, like I said, late winter, early spring to after the May winter storms. So that sand is on the beach a little bit more during the summer season.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand all about that. So in the 2016 order, there was a drilled benchmark going in to monitor like the elevation. Is that something that is going to go back?
I would recommend that, yes.
Absolutely. It'll be a trigger point that everybody can see. So yeah, we would establish that. And getting back to the wall, I have the
what you submitted, but the plan is very small. So when you talk about a smooth face and a rough face, what exactly is that?
Oh, sure. Well, you know what the wall looks like out of your association in front of the Kriegers right now?
Yes. Yep. It's got
That's
mortar
what we classify as smooth faced, meaning that the contractor tries to place all the facets of the rock so that it makes an even surface that if it were, like, say, on a flat backyard, you could walk on like a patio, but now it's tipped. And typically what they do is they fill the joints with grout material, whether it's chink stone or concrete. That was usually the method used in the 70s to keep the sediment from coming out from behind the wall, which would cause the wall to collapse landward if they lost the material. So that's the classic look. There may be some bedding stone under there. We don't know. It didn't look like there was when we looked inside the cavity. It looked like there was just glacial till material, virgin material from the bank. So the difference between that style wall and the wall that we design, and I'm sorry the plan's so small, we make sure that the specific gravity of the rocks are pointing, the specific gravity is leaning back towards the bank so that the weight of the rock, and if it's keyed together properly, it acts as a one entire unit across the whole face of the wall. But because they're keyed together, any wave energy that comes into it, we do the calculations based on the Army Corps manual, the wave energy can be up to 50 to 100,000 pounds of force against the wall. So now instead of a smooth face absorbing all that energy, there's 25% pore spaces open on purpose because of the way we point the rocks out towards the ocean, but they're leaning back so that their weight is against the bank. So we get not only gravity working down to hold the wall down against the toe stone, but it's also, there's a vector of force that's holding the wall against the bank. Whereas the smooth-faced wall, the specific gravity is very precarious on those rocks, so that when the waves pound against it, it tries to drive the rock, individual rock, against the bank, but there's no real weight factor that's pointing down towards the ground because they aren't purposely turning the rock so that the longest dimension of the rock is pointing perpendicular to the ocean and perpendicular to the bank, so that it's resisting the wave energy, but it's opening up the pore spaces to allow energy to go into the secondary stone, which is roughly anywhere from just under a ton to 500 pounds. And then there's bedding stone under that. Then there's the filter cloth. So that all acts as a filter to the wave energy, so that it actually allows the energy of the wave to go right into the wall. And then it turns around inside the wall. But because of all the different stones that we have that are against the filter cloth, it doesn't pull the stones out through the pore spaces, but then the wave energy can come back out through the pore space.
So it's a relief. That you're creating these reliefs.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the 2016 plan, there was like kind of like a sub wall going in front. It was like kind of like a new toe. That's all done, right? You're not
doing that.
Yeah. Okay. And just to kind of reiterate, all the construction is going to take place on the Kriegers property. So you don't need Windermere Beach Trust property to stage from.
No, we don't.
Great. I think I don't have any more questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And you're welcome.
All right, thank you. So any further comments from members of the audience?
Yeah, Brad?
Yes.
Doug Krieger again. I just wanted to add, when we originally thought of doing it, we would have had to come all the way from the Bank Street beach. And in looking at the project, that That's why we're staging it completely on our property so they don't have to work with the tide. So they're coming down very far away from the association's beach. So I'm delighted to keep as much distance as we can from the association. So that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have a couple of comments myself, and one is to follow up on Ernie's comments on the replacement and really the status of the replacement. And I guess just my thoughts are that if it's a structure that was in before the Wetlands Protection Act came in, then it's fully okay to replace it. And if it's a structure that was permitted, you know, after the Wetlands Protection Act came in, then it's also something that can be replaced. So I guess one question I have, I haven't seen this in the, you know, in the documents anywhere. If, you know, did this have a previous permit either through the town or a Chapter 91? Is that something that's documented anywhere, Don?
It was originally constructed, Brad, above mean high water, so there wouldn't be a 91 license. It was permitted. I'd have to check to see if it was permitted back in the early 70s. I don't recall that we flushed that out because we were going on the guise that you already permitted this reconstruction in a certain method. So we just amended that original application, which was filed in 2019, Amy. So we didn't see the need to go back in history. We can do that if you want to see if there was a permit issued, but because it was pre-Wetlands Protection Act, it doesn't necessarily mean that it needed to be.
Right. No, I'm just trying to make sense of it, and I think Ernie brought up some good points.
Yeah.
Now, that previous NOI, was that for repair or for reconstruction?
It was more for taking the rock off the beach and placing it against the existing wall and adding some to the top to increase the elevation. So it wasn't a take apart, which I'm glad didn't happen, because if we just laid those rocks against there, it'd even be worse than it is right now.
Right.
We didn't know what was going on behind it, though. You know, I had no idea.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that work needs to be done on the site. I think moving forward, a project like this, it would be helpful to have something on the permitting history so we can frame it right away, you know, pre-Wetlands Protection Act, post-Wetlands Protection Act, just so it has. And then probably the last bit of gray area that Ernie brings up is, you know, the change in footprint. And I don't really know, you know, how people have approached this over time. Certainly you can replace something in the footprint without too much heartache. I think when you change the footprint, then I think you reconsider it, but that's what we're doing with this notice of intent. So I think I'm comfortable with that aspect, but I'll finish up my last comment, encourage any other follow-up comments on that issue. But my last one is on the nourishment. And I guess I don't favor having it in perpetuity. I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen down the road if people will be inclined or able to put a lot more material down in the middle of the winter and have it degrade some of these subtidal habitats. That is something I've seen. We don't talk about this very much because we're all interested in nourishment and all the positive features of nourishment. But at times I have seen either too much material or put down too far down the slope, and you can degrade pretty valuable subtidal habitats. So my interest would be to have this either a 3 or 5 year window and then revisit how it worked and then do something like that. So those are two things I just put out there. And if any commissioners have follow-up comments, please go ahead.
Excuse me, Brad, this is Stan. Along that line, one of the things I was wondering when I raised those questions before, is that something that could be measured each year somehow, so as to whether nourishment would be required or not?
Yes. That's one of the things that Wellfleet has on their orders and conditions, that a couple of transects be done prior to construction to establish what the beach elevation is. Then subsequently each year before you do any nourishment, shoot the beach again, plot that against the benchmark or the baseline, and then make a determination if nourishment's needed. So you could either use the trigger point as the gauge, or you could use, like, if it's dropped 6 inches or more, then nourishment should be required. And we usually do that as a report to the Wellfleet Conservation Commission, so we could do the same thing here. We could shoot those, send them to Amy, say, looks like it needs nourishment, or it doesn't, and then she could put that in the file, and you would have an ongoing record of that, which would parlay into what Brad just said about the 3 to 5 year window. You'd have a collected bunch of data that you could determine whether or not this is the right thing to do or not.
Right, and that's why I asked, because rather than just dumping every year, whether you needed it or not, that's why I prefer this SWIP method.
Makes sense to me.
Works for me.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure, Carolyn.
Amy, for the history of these permits, Mr. Doherty was referring to a 2016 permit, and I recall the discussion of heavy machinery coming over the beaches and revetments that are there. So that permit was issued in 2016, expired in 2019. We then gave them a new permit for basically the same thing that will expire in 2022. And now they're looking for
I don't have that other permit with me, so I forgive me, I don't recall if we originally permitted in 2016, then extended it in 2019 till 2022, or if there was a new file in 2019. I don't remember off the top of my head. Actually, I can check in our permitting software.
No, that's okay. But my just getting it straight in my own head that the permitting started in 2016.
I'm looking at my software, and it does look like that, yes.
And they didn't do anything about it with the permit we gave them?
They have, no, with the exception of the emergency work that they did.
Okay. And Don, when is the schedule that you think you'll do? This looks like you can't put it off for another 3 years.
Mr. Krieger, his wife, and one of our contractors was down there right after the emergency came up, and Mr. Krieger said that he's all full intent of building it this winter. And we have 2 contractors that have bid on it, so that well, I've looked at it. We're waiting for their bids on it, but we can't ask them to bid on it until we have the approval. So that's why they haven't given us a number, but they are prepared to do the work this winter.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make one comment while I'm thinking about it?
Sure.
This has to do with the knitting of the 2 revetments on the Krieger's property, 10 feet away from the WTBT property. Could you make, if the commission moves forward with this evening, can you make that change, Don, on the plans?
Yep.
Thanks.
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right. Any last comments from commissioners?
Brad, I'd just like to say on Ernie's question about new structure versus old structure, I don't see any problem with considering this as a rebuilding an existing structure. It's clearly something that has to be done, and we are having the opportunity now to review the plans, and I don't see any reason not to proceed as a rebuild.
All right. Thanks, John.
Brad, if I may?
Okay. Yeah, Mark.
Thank you. I would agree with what John just said regarding a rebuild. Any structure, no matter what it is, has a life expectancy, and as it fails and as it's repaired, it's pretty much customary to upgrade it to things that have been learned within its life. This wall was built 40 or 50 years ago. Engineers have refined their their craft from then to now, and education has served them well. So this is an opportunity to seize that, and to me, it's a positive move, especially where you have the support of the owner to go forward.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I think we're probably ready for a motion at this point, and we can hash out some of the monitoring and nourishment issues under discussion if people want, or they can go ahead and put something in a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve number 1, Wawa-Tacey Road, the proposed rock revetment reconstruction and sand access ramp. With the sand access ramp, did we discuss that? Okay, that's good. With the comments that we included about sand nourishment and the change in the end of the new revetment joining with the revetment to the next property.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second that. Stan.
All right, seconded by Stan. So under discussion, I guess we should probably make sure we're all comfortable with how nourishment occurs and what type of reporting. I like Don's ideas. I think it'd be nice to have a physical benchmark in the revetment that could be surveyed against, and then have an annual reporting to the administrator on the status. And I guess, so have some brief annual report to that regard. And I guess, do folks want to see a 3-year period, a 5-year period in perpetuity? What does everyone favor?
I like 5. I have a question. Does this eliminate the permit that was taken out in 2019? This is a totally new permit?
It would have to, my recommendation is once they get this permit and build the wall, that they file for a certificate of compliance for that to close it out.
Okay, didn't we require that, those measurements for replenishment in the previous permit?
Again, I don't have it with me, so I
think we did, but then if they're going to close, that's totally separate. So if they're going to close that out, then we need to treat this as a whole new permit.
Correct.
Okay.
I would just say from a tracking standpoint, it would make it easier on me if you would, the life of the permit's going to be 3 years. Unless they ask, I mean, I don't foresee them needing to ask for an extension. This will get done this year. But the monitoring should be for at least 3, I would say 3 years. If we could keep it consistent with the permit life, it would make tracking it easier for me. And then at that point in time, that they could do kind of a report. I mean, you're going to do a yearly check anyways, and if we have to nourish, we nourish, but I have a check at that 3-year mark and then see where we're at.
I'm okay with it, but I do have a question. What happens to nourishment at the end of the 3 years then? Do they have to apply for something to continue?
Actually don't, because the town has a townwide nourishment permit. So as long as we keep our permit active, they would be covered to do their set amount of nourishment above mean high water under the town permit if they chose to.
So there's no requirement beyond the 3 years to nourish that revetment?
I think at that, I mean, that's what my concern was. Is how to put that requirement into, I mean, I'm sure I could word the condition in such a way that there's to be monitoring for years, and then we can discuss how to make that a longer term requirement if it is shown to be beneficial and necessary. I don't have it worked out just yet, but I'm sure I could do it.
Amy, I have a question on that, on the town plan. Surprised to hear the town plan would cover private areas. You sure the town plan isn't just for town beaches?
It is not just for town beaches.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be a great
That's
approach.
what you approved a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Well, that'll come up again, right?
It will. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to reconsider that.
Okay.
It just seems that, you know, there should be some ability to see what's going in every year, different locations. Well, these plans have, you know, 70 cubic yards at the start and then 34 cubic yards annually. So that will get us through the 3-year period, and then it can be revisited. So I think the report will be very valuable to see what happens and learn from it. Okay, so those are the conditions. Anything else? Okay, well, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Start with you, Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
I'm going to say nay.
Okay, and myself, Brad Chase, aye. So we have 6 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion carries. And thank you all for very good discussion.
Thank you.
And good luck this winter.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for 31 Shore Road, map 2, parcel B1-7, installation of a boulder revetment to prevent erosion at the toe of the coastal bank. And so, you, Don?
Mr. Chairman, this is Bob Rogers from GAF Engineering.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
So, we had a pretty quick turnaround requirement from the last hearing due to the holiday. So we submitted revised plans last Tuesday in order to be able to hold this meeting. The commission asked for a lot of additional information during the initial public hearing. Some of it was related to a proposal to place boulders, but more, I guess a couple of things that I was able to determine with respect to the dwelling is, so I think I made a statement during the hearing that I thought the original dwelling was built in the 30s. We still believe that, but so on the 1962 assessors maps, the town's assessors maps, all the homes in this neighborhood show up on the 1962 map. So we're certainly pre 77, 78. I did a little research on my own, the aerial photos through Google Earth, and it seemed like the house was pretty much in the same spot. You know, there was a 2004 rebuild, but then Mr. Petroni confirmed for me that when the house was reconstructed, it was reconstructed on the same foundation, the original stone foundation. So it was not moved any closer to the shoreline. After the initial hearing and respecting the comments of the commissioners, as well as the bylaw, you know, I had a long discussion with Mr. Petroni. And so, you know, the major revision to these plans is eliminating the request for boulders and just going with a heavy-duty quad rolls. We've got a cross-sectional detail on sheet 2, which, you know, so both sheets, we're eliminating the request for the placement of boulders, and we're willing to try the soft solution, the installation of the quad rolls with duckbill anchors and the planting of the beach grass on that. The detail came straight from the CZM. What is it called? The Storm Smart Coasts. Is everybody still with me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, okay. So the Storm Smart Coast. So we resubmitted these plans on Tuesday, and then we received the report from Sea Grant from Berman on Monday of this week. And so we've reviewed it, but we haven't had a chance to respond to it. I am going to be requesting a continuance at the end of this continued hearing so that we can address those issues. And one of the positive things that we took from his report was that we see a need to eliminate our geotextile fabric and replace that with a quarter blanket, which would be under the quarter rolls. And we may need to show some additional detail just to make it clear that we expect these quarter rolls to be covered with sand. Again, our cross-section matches what's shown in the CZM fact sheet 4, but we certainly understand, and I've had the benefit of a few conversations with Amy, so we certainly understand that the commission would want to see these quarter rolls covered with sand. And I guess I'm not an expert on that, but we do want to heavily plant it with beach grass per the comb planting spacing detail. But we also don't want to be, looking at or having exposed quarter rolls, that would just increase the potential for, storms to, to cause problems in that area again. So we felt like we had legitimate reasons for the initial design, and, it's certainly beneficial to me listening to the discussion of the hearing prior, because I think my point was that the loose boulders that will remain on the other parts of this property, there's sufficient spaces in between those boulders for sediment to go from the coastal bank onto the coastal beach. And so I guess just in terms of the report from Greg Berman, we disagree with his comments on the land form that he lists on page 2. We strongly feel that when you look at the definitions in the Wetlands Protection Act of a coastal dune versus a coastal bank, that we much more closely resemble a coastal bank than a coastal dune. I'm certainly interested to hear tonight what the commission, what the commission would feel the impact would be, or what they might be requesting if it was a coastal dune versus a coastal bank. But I think also, Mr. Petroni has agreed to bring in someone who is more of an expert, a coastal geologist, to look at that if that's, we assume that you may feel that that's necessary, and we're certainly willing to do that and provide the amount of time that would be needed to do that. I just wanted to keep things moving on this, and since Mr. Petroni was willing to change the plan from the boulders to the soft solution, I wanted to get that in front of the commission, and I didn't anticipate receiving this report on Monday, but that's fine. Amy was just acting as she was directed at the first public hearing to, provide a determination whether it's coastal dune or coastal bank. So I'll stop at that, and you can just take us in any direction you want, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you for the summary, and I'll ask Amy for a summary of her own.
Yep. First, I see Mr. Petroni's on. I want to say thanks for being so expeditious in removing those straw bales. They were out almost immediately, and I've had some conversation also with the neighbors. So just to let the commission know that that has been taken care of. In regards, I had the opportunity to meet with our county coastal processes specialist, Greg Burton, who is a coastal geologist. And I think in his report, he said too, it wasn't an in-depth study, but after visiting the site a couple of times, my inclination was that this property is kind of at the crux between what is a coastal dune to the west and what is more of a bank formation to the east. And where exactly those two met up and changed was not clear to me. And of course, it's important to know what landform you're talking about, especially when you're talking about any type of coastal engineered structure, soft, hard, whatever. So Greg came out, we did use an auger and not just looked at what was superficial on the outside, which is a lot of slipper shells, kind of indicative of some nourishment over the years, but dug farther in and up and did find what we thought was windblown sand beach deposit. But of course are happy to look at that further and coordinate with the applicant if they want to. I'm not sure necessarily. I mean, with this proposal, you're proposing to go from rock to a softer solution, which is coir rolls. I would say if you could get beach grass established on them, you cover them with sand. If you can get beach grass established on them, I don't foresee a need for, they should stay covered because beach grass will naturally trap windblown sand and deposit it over the rolls. So that may not necessarily be an annual, type of requirement to keep those, maybe just a monitoring thing. For our coastal dune, the performance standards are just that a dune, if it is a dune, the dune has to be able to move, essentially, landward, laterally. It just has to be able to move, and it moves because windblown sand moves. If it is a bank, it's more of a vertical buffer that provides storm damage prevention and flood control, and a bank is essentially glacial till, what was deposited here versus windblown, which is a dune. So going to a softer structure, soft structures in certain instances like coir rolls can be allowed in coastal dunes if they prove that they have an impact on the movement of the dune. So as I spoke with Bob on the phone a few times, and Greg just came out here late last week. He did turn this around quite quickly. It's really meant as a guidance document to get the commission to think, and applicants to think about things. It's not set in stone. My takeaway from it is when looking at your proposal versus his recommendations and my thoughts on the property is that 5 rolls could potentially be used here. Maybe the height, so right now you have a height of 4 rolls, one of which is buried, so you would only see 3. So it is a fairly low wall at a slant. My thought is maybe to be less of a vertical buffer and act less of a wall, maybe we decrease that to 1 that's underground as the toe, and 1 or 2 that are exposed to give it a more solid toe, try to plant that, put some sand on it, nourish that, monitor that over time. Potentially, even if there's a little bit of room above mean high water, do some seasonal snow to additionally try to trap some sand there, and then obviously, remove it seasonally. So I think regardless of landform, I think you're, in my opinion, you're on the right track with what you're proposing, with maybe some slight modification to make it just a little bit lower, because if it's lower and at a gradual slope, then any windblown sand from the dune, from the beach, can migrate easier rather than being a more vertical buffer as is kind of shown with the three that would be exposed right here. But I will leave it at that till right now.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, let's go through questions and comments from the commissioners. I'll start with Mark.
No remarks at this time.
Okay, John.
Yeah, so I guess what's unclear to me is it seems that the original purpose of the application was to forestall or prevent any further erosion in that 36 feet. And the preferred method was a rock revetment, but the owner has modified the proposal to Quar rules, but still the point of the Quar rules is to hold things in place, which seems to me to be directly in contradiction for the requirement to allow a dune, if that is a dune, to move and move landward if the dune so desires or whatever. So there's a bit of a contradiction there, a little bit of tension between those goals, and I'm at the moment not certain for myself how to resolve that tension. I suppose part of the answer is resolving the question of whether that's dune or not. But having been there, there isn't much of a bank there, just looking at it. That's not a technical assessment, but my casual observation is that it looks more like a dune than a bank to me. But I guess the question to Amy is, seems like we will need to resolve the question of whether that's dune or not, and how are we going to do that?
Well, first, I mean, I'm happy to coordinate, if the commission wants, I'm happy to coordinate with the owner and certainly have, you know, Greg go back out there, or even potentially have Greg meet and go out there if they choose to have their own coastal geologist out there. Greg's not biased. I mean, he has no stake in the game, if you will. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Sorry, can I finish one real quick?
Yes, Amy, I'm sorry.
Thank you, no problem. In response to your question about the movement, John, I thought about that too, and you know, that this would change or alter the movement. I did think about that too, but I also thought about kind of a do nothing potentially could remove that dune altogether, and we would lose what little there may be left. So that was going through my mind too. And with that, I'll stop. And Bob, if through the chair, if you want to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could, I would just say definitively that we will be hiring our own coastal geologist, you know, someone who is relatively well known. Can't get out here for a few weeks. So, you know, what I was able to access was just CZM mapping, which I did email to Amy. I think she shared it with you. You know, the types of things that Mr. Petroni and I can look at when we're doing decision making. You know, it points to, you know, CZM has it all mapped as there is a coastal bank. Now, there may be coastal dune between the coastal beach and the coastal bank, but if you look at the CZM mapping, it's all coastal bank. And if you look at the plans that the town had back in 2013, the Coastal Engineering Company had this whole area, you know, when the town was going to do the beach nourishment or the significant enhancement of the beach, you know, above the intertidal area, these plans all show coastal beach and no coastal dune. So, you know, there is some readily available evidence that indicates that it's coastal bank, notwithstanding the DEP policy 92-1. But we are going to hire our coastal geologist, and we're going to have him look at it. And I'm certainly not casting any aspersions at Mr. Berman or any charges of bias, but just it is a little inaccurate to say all evidence indicates that the landform is a dune when it's limited to one auger boring, and it does, there is no reference to glacial till, sand, grain size in either the definition of a coastal dune or a coastal bank. It stands to reason that many coastal banks are comprised of glacial till, and of course, coastal dunes you're going to see beach sand and that type of thing. But I think there are many coastal banks that are comprised of sand as well. We certainly run into that all the time in the town of Wareham and on our side of the canal, if you will, where we work regularly. So I think I've gotten my answer as to the importance that the commission puts on this issue. So we certainly will be.
Quarter, right?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry.
I muted that person.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're going to move back to comments from the commissioners, and I think we've all realized we're moving towards a continuance here, and we will get further information on, the resource area type. So, but please, if you have any other questions, let's hear them, starting with Stan.
I don't have any further comments or questions.
Okay. Carolyn.
If this is determined to be a coastal bank, I would approve the request that's in front of us today for the soft solution. If this is determined to be a dune, I think it's interesting what Amy said, that in this particular circumstance, possibly you could lose the dune if it's not protected. So that I'd have to think about. But if it's determined to be a bank, that's an easy answer to me. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Amy's take on it. I suppose either way, protecting that toe with one or two rolls and some planting. That's my take on it.
All right, thanks. Ernie?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments that have been made. The only additional one that I would add is if there's any sort of solution applied to that particular strip of beach, whether it's a dune or a bank, it has to also take into account the impact on the adjoining property as well. And I'd like to have some sort of an assessment of what that impact would be for our final decision.
Okay, thank you. I guess I've got a couple of questions on the status of the hay bales, and maybe this is directed towards Amy. When the hay bales were removed, do we see any damage of any evidence of damage to beach grass?
Very minor, if any, on this particular property. This is just a small stretch compared to a neighboring property. And I did not see much. I mean, I saw a small amount. We're talking maybe 10 square feet at most. It's small when I was down there last weekend. So I think in this one, I don't know if we necessarily need to do any replanting, because I think over time with that small area, nature is just going to take itself in another year or so. But the next property, the adjacent property might be a different story. So. Okay.
And what is the status with the different fines issued to the property owners and the contractors?
Well, I just found out who the contractor was today because they called me about the adjacent property and had mentioned that they did both. So I didn't know until today who the contractor was. So I did talk to them and we had a good conversation. They said for the next property over that, so we gave them a deadline of the 7th, and they said they should be able to have it out by then for the adjacent property. And because they came forward and were chatting with me about it and wanted to talk about replanting, I did tell them, because obviously they were booked with other work and this kind of just came about. I told them if by Monday, which is the 7th, if they needed an extra day, as long as they were working on it, because they said it's going to take a couple of days to do, that I could be a little lenient, you know, give them an extra day or two, but that they were going to be getting a fine. And the fines were sent out to Mr. Petroni and his neighbors.
All right, thank you for that update, Amy. Any comments from members of the audience?
Brad, I have another question.
Sure.
Looking at the previous property that we were, revetment we were talking about, the damage in the past week was sizable. And are we, by not taking a decision tonight, are we risking the fact a couple more winter storms and an additional damage there? Or do you think we are okay to put off and wait for the decision on the dune versus the bank?
I guess that's for you, Mr. Rogers.
Oh, well, of course, we don't know what nature is going to do, but, you know, we are certainly willing to take the time necessary to present our case regarding the resource area definition. Is the landform a coastal bank or a coastal dune? So we want to take that time and you know, accept the risk. I mean, it seems like they've been making a temporary fix with hay bales every winter. So it doesn't seem like we're in too much danger at this location. But, you know, we don't want the commission to have to vote with that big of a question in their minds as to whether it's dune or bank. So, and we'd just be looking for a 1-month continuance.
Okay, so not the next meeting, but the one after?
Yes, correct. Okay. Yeah,
when would that be, Amy?
First.
That's going to be January 6th.
Okay, so that sounds okay?
We're certainly comfortable with it.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to move that we continue the hearing for 31 Shore Road, map 2 parcel B17 until January 6th, 2021.
I'll second.
Seconded by Carolyn, thank you. And we'll do a roll call. All those in favor say aye, starting with Mark.
Aye.
Okay, John.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. So motion carries. We have a continuance until January 6th. Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to continue, Amy? You ready to go?
I am. I'm dealing with a dog who has some issues right now.
Oh, yes.
So if I get up and move around, I'm still listening to you and everything, and I'll just be back in a moment. So. Okay,
no problem. All right. Well, next we have a notice of intent for 10 Fiddler's Landing, map 6, parcel A1-10. It's a proposed access stairway on an existing dock. Do we have a representative here tonight to describe the project?
Hi. Yep. Nate Jones, Coastal Engineering. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So, yeah, this property, 10 Fiddler's Landing, has an existing coastal bank case to access the water to a dock. The dock is a fixed timber pier. There's no float or ramp at the end of it. there's just a ladder to access the water. So the owners primarily use it for bringing kayaks down or paddle boards or small non-motorized structures. And in the past, because there's only a ladder there, the owners have, injured themselves, and it's a little difficult to maneuver around there to get access to the water. So the proposal that you see in front of you is to remove the ladder and instead just put a timber staircase in within the same footprint of the existing structure. So between the last two pile vents of the pier, that portion of the platform is going to be removed, and we're going to build stairs from the second to last pile vent to the last pile vent. So there's no increase in square footage of the structure at all. We're staying within the confines of it. We are having a proposed aluminum alternative. We haven't figured out the exact details of what the staircase will be. We can design it out of wood, but because it is an intertidal zone, it'll get waterlogged pretty frequently, and we are proposing to have it seasonally removed. So if it's a waterlogged timber fixed staircase, it can be quite heavy. So we do have an aluminum alternative in there. We did run this by the Waterways Committee, and they declined to even look at it. They said they had no problems with it, John Rendon, because we are not increasing any portion of this into the waterway. Like I said, we're going outboard of the existing pile vents, the seawardmost pile vents. All the access will be from the uplands along the timber portion of the pier. Above the salt marsh, no work will be in the salt marsh. And it's going to have to be done during low tide, just because, as I stated before, that last vent is in tidal zone. It's between high and low water. But I don't see this taking more than a day to do it. So one tide cycle and we'll be done. With that, I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us, please?
Sure. If the commission recalls, a few months ago, the Lappins came in front of you informally, just under discussion, to kind of shoot this idea past you, explained that, they and their family like to paddleboard and canoe and kayak. And right now they have a ladder that goes down from the structure, and it just is fairly precarious. So we tossed it around a little bit without kind of committing to anything. And the commission chatted about, they had wanted basically a staircase to a platform, wouldn't go out any farther, and that's what you're seeing, into the waterway, is past the seaward limit of any marsh grasses. That was kind of critical to the commission and to myself, that it's past the seaward limit of any marsh grass. And we talked a little bit, and we can talk more about the materials, and also, whether it should be lifted out seasonally, whether it should be lifted out more frequently, like with each use, et cetera. So, and before I forget, we did have a comment from an abutter, and I don't know if all of it has to do with conservation, but I said I would state it, is the abutter would prefer wood to aluminum, and prefer that it not be stored on, like the removable portion wouldn't be stored on the existing dock or walkway in the wintertime. Obviously we will look at materials that are going to have the least impact to a resource area and be the easiest for an applicant to maneuver. And storage, we typically require storage of a float, which this isn't a float because it's not a dock, but we typically require that to be, landward of the top of coastal bank in a cleared area. But in certain circumstances, we have allowed floats to be tied to the top, the walkway portion of an existing walkway part of the dock. But, so I said I would mention that. my recommendation for, well, I would, because it's not going out any further, it's not going to have an adverse impact to salt marsh, and it would be seasonal. My recommendation is approval of it, and it kind of gets down to the materials and if it should stay in completely all season, you know, May 15 to October 15, or if it should be removed or lifted periodically. Due to a couple of reasons, I would recommend aluminum or, you know, something lighter than wood, if possible. And also because wood, any wood that was in contact with water, we wouldn't allow to be pressure treated, most likely. So which would degrade faster if it wasn't pressure treated. So that's just something for the applicant to note. And I would recommend storage either up in the yard area or driveway of the applicant's home, or safely adhered to the top of, you know, of the walkway. And I guess, so where would this platform be? I have to open up your plan here, Nate. Where does this platform sit at low water?
So if you look at the plan.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Section AA proposed probably give you the best idea.
Got it.
The mean high water elevation.
Okay.
The high water goes all the way back, I believe, into the marsh somewhere. And then the low water, it stops probably 5 feet seaward of the staircase.
Okay.
So it's frequently underwater.
Yes. Yeah, and so I was just curious where they would step off from. So again, I would recommend a light metal. And then in terms of, you know, pulling it up every time, I don't see that as one that's a monitoring thing, and I don't think we're going to be able to monitor that and feasible for the owners. I don't know if that's entirely feasible. To pull it up, put it up and down constantly. So I would recommend that it could be left in seasonally. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, let's go through the Commissioner's comments and questions. We'll start with Mark.
I'd look on this favorably if it was done out of aluminum and seasonal. Other than that, I really have no other remarks.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, I agree with what Mark just said. It seems like it ought to be aluminum or some other light metal. I don't know what other light metals there are, but partly because it increases the chances of compliance. You have heavy wood, it's more likely that it's just going to be like a pain for someone to actually remove it. So I'd be inclined to condition that it not be wood, it be light metal. Other than that, I don't have any comments.
Okay, thanks. Stan?
I concur with those comments, and I just want to clarify, I want to make sure I'm reading the plan right, because of Amy's reference to a platform. These are just stairs right down into the water. There's no platform at the bottom, correct, Nathan?
Correct. Right now, it's just a elevated platform, and the last bend would be removed, and then the stairs would be put in its place.
What do you mean an elevated platform?
It's like an elevated walkway. There's no like floating dock.
Right. There's no landing or anything like that, and that's the way I read the plan. Just stairs. Right. Okay, thank you.
That was my mistake, Stan. I got a couple across.
I understood, Amy. I just wanted to clarify it though when I heard that.
All right, thanks, Stan. Carolyn?
I would agree that it should not be wood. If I were the owner, I would want to figure out some sort of circumstance that I could use a pulley and bring them up and store them on the dock itself seasonally, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. Jim?
Yeah, I agree with previous comments. I think aluminum's the way to go. The only problem I can see with storing on the dock seasonally is that would probably increase shading a fair amount. I don't know if it would be in the salt marsh area or not at that point. It seems like it might be, though. That's just something to consider there. Those are my comments.
Okay, good point, Jim. All right, Ernie.
Yep, I have no comments. Thanks.
Okay. I agree with all the previous comments, and I'll just add, I think it probably has to be aluminum just to make it feasible to bring it up and down. And one thing I'm concerned about maybe is the submerged portion will probably be fouled, and so you'll probably have to paint it with anti-fouling paint. So that's a little impact that wasn't there before. And then I agree with Jim's comment. I think that, you know, there could be some increased shading, you know, on the walkway. And so that's something we're trying to avoid. And I have one question for Nate. So the piling that's there now will be used again, the outermost piling, or replaced?
Yeah, so the two outermost piles will remain, and that'll be the support of the stringers, the lower end of the stringers.
Right. Do you see the need for some kind of a pulley system on this to lift it up?
Well, if it was only being removed once a year seasonally, you know, the owners could just hire someone to go out there and lift it up. It would be light enough where it could be done by hand, but you need multiple people to do it. And as far as, if I can just go back to the shading aspect, if this helps at all, the treads are open risers, and the treads themselves will be open material, open aluminum. So they will have holes in them. I mean, there will be some increase in shading, but overall, the most part, I think the wood decking actually has less spacing than the metal aluminum staircase would. So it really wouldn't be too much of an increase in shading, and it would be outside of the salt marsh. It would be close, but it would be outside of the salt marsh.
Okay, how do you feel about the anti-fouling issue?
The owners actually prefer aluminum. They've already talked to an aluminum fabricator. So if the commission feels like they would only want aluminum and no wood, I think the applicants would be okay with that, and we can revise the plan to show it.
What I meant was the need to apply anti-fouling paint to the aluminum.
For most aluminum, the marine grade aluminum that we use, I've never heard of the anti-fouling paint. I mean, I've heard of, you know, paint that you put on timber to get rid of any pores or anything like that. But as far as aluminum, I've actually never seen it. At least with the marine grade aluminum that we would use.
Yeah, interesting. Certainly outboard engines that are made of aluminum, things grow on them. They have to be painted. Well, we can always put a condition in that it needs to be, you know, a grade of anti-fouling paint that is at least offensive to the environment or something like that. So, all right, any comments from members of the audience? All right, seeing none, does one of the commissioners like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the change on the stairway, the existing dock at 10 Fiddler's Landing, changing the last section of the dock to an aluminum or non-wooden stairway. I think we should change it to a stairway and then in the order of condition, eliminate wood and recommend aluminum or marine grade.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by John. So under discussion, we are looking for aluminum. Is there any need to put up or marine grade metal otherwise, or is it just aluminum to metal? I imagine it's not going to be stainless steel.
Yeah, I would, if they can use something other than aluminum, they can ask us, but we could put aluminum.
Okay. And do also under discussion, how about seasonality? Do people want to see this, have any dates for deployment similar to floats and so forth, or just leave it open?
I think you should give it dates like you do for docks or for floats, which is usually May 15th to October 15th.
Is that agreeable with the proponents, do you think, Nathan?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. And do we want to have something on anti-fouling, just say no anti-fouling paint, or be silent on that? Just say no paint?
I'd be inclined to say no paint.
I'd be inclined to say no.
Okay. All right then.
No wood, no paint.
Okay. All right
And
then.
storage, we didn't settle that, if it could be on the walkway, or if you just don't want to deal with it on the walkway and just say that it has to be stored up near the house in the off season.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say outside of the 50.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good call.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on the motion with those conditions. We'll have a roll call. All those in favor say aye, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, next up, we have a notice of intent for 2 Quezon Lane, map 7, parcel A50. It's a proposal to remove and reconstruct a single-family dwelling with associated site improvements. Do we have a representative here tonight?
Good evening, Sean Riley, Engineering, representing the applicant, here with Katrine Higgins from Wilkinson Ecological, and Sarah Toronto Flores is the project attorney. For those of you that have gotten out to the site, it's a fairly wide open site, not a lot of vegetation, other than the screening along the west side. The proposal before you is to raise and replace the dwelling, shifting the house further back, pulling the patio that's close to the top of the coastal bank back further away from the resource area, reducing the overall coverage within the 0 to 50-foot buffer, providing mitigation for the increase that we're proposing within the 50 to 100-foot buffer. The resource areas are just coastal beach, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. We're proposing to remove the in-ground timber steppers that lead to the beach access stair, infill that, and provide mitigation to either side of it, and then replace the existing beach access stair in kind in the same footprint. All the septic components are to be located outside of the 100-foot buffer, and the existing cesspools that are within the 0 to 50-foot buffer are to be filled and abandoned. Seems like a fairly straightforward proposal. I'll entertain any questions on the house or the site improvements, or we could have Katrine go through the mitigation that Wilkinson is proposing.
All right, let's hear Amy's summary first, and then we can go back to the mitigation items.
Okay. So my summary on the plan, you can see that there is a reduction in hardscape in the 0 to 50 foot buffer and an increase in the 50 to 100 foot buffer. And we'll discuss that when we talk about mitigation. The new proposed structure is a little bit farther away from the resource area than the current structure. The current structure at its closest point, which is the patio, is 13.5 feet from the top of coastal bank. The house itself is 27.7 feet. And the new structure, the closest point would be a proposed covered porch and terrace combination. That would be at 29.3 feet from the top of the coastal bank. They said they were aware that, mitigation is at a minimum of a 2-to-1 ratio for any increase in the 50 to 100 foot buffer. There's improvement of 2 cesspools that are within the 50 being removed or pumped and filled, and a brand new Title V septic, which is located completely outside the 100-foot buffer. There is also a proposed garage outside the 100-foot buffer. They will also need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I believe they're going to next week, because they're of sideline setbacks. They're centering the house a little bit more on the lot, it appears. Or they're certainly not getting less compliant. So that's pretty much it in regards to house comments I have, Brad, until we get to the mitigation comments.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and hear on the mitigation plan.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Katrine Higgins from Wilkinson Ecological Design. And so our proposal is, in our plan, the restoration plan that we provided, as well as the work protocol, we're looking to propose restoration spanning over 2,410 square feet of the property. And of course, that consists of invasive plant removal, lawn removal, and native plant restoration. And this is all in an effort to serve as mitigation for the activities that Sean described. So, like Sean said, our work is very straightforward. It's quite similar to the project that we permitted with you on Lincoln Avenue, I think in early March. It's very consistent to that project and those existing conditions. So the area, it contains invasive and non-native species on this property, just like that property did, primarily consisting of Asiatic bittersweet, Japanese honeysuckle, nightshade, and a lot of rugosa rose. And there are some native species existing. Primarily, if you were out there, you probably would have noticed the American beach grass and some seaside goldenrod, some Virginia creeper as well. But there's clear signs on this property that the non-native plants, particularly the bittersweet and the rugosa rose, are displacing the native vegetation that should be there. It's forming a dense thicket that is really shading out any of the native species that should be growing in this area. So like most of our projects, we're proposing to remove all the non-native species and the invasive species. And we're proposing, in addition, 900 square feet of lawn removal that's shown in our plan just landward of that top of coastal bank. So you'll see we're going to propose to remove lawn in that area in order to create a thicker vegetated buffer on the top of the bank. And as you see on our plan, that is really increasing the depth of that vegetated buffer by between 6 and 12 feet, depending on where you are along that bank. So once that vegetation removal takes place, we'd like to immediately plant beach grass and little blue stem about 1,000 herbaceous plugs or plants throughout the area, particularly focusing in that area of the lawn removal. So that would be primarily beach grass in that area. And then shrubs also to be supplementally planted throughout the project area, shrubs like beach plum, bayberry, Carolina rose, and sweet fern. So in all, just to summarize, we're proposing invasive plant removal, lawn removal, and replanting over 2,400 square feet of the property. And this is really to provide benefits to the resource area by improving the habitat available for wildlife, particularly through increasing the native plant diversity that will be on the site, and also strengthening the stormwater function of the site by getting rid of that, removing that lawn to create a thicker vegetated buffer. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any responses to that, Amy?
Sure. I really liked how part of your mitigation planting actually is taking place on the beach. It's an area, so you see it seaward of the wall. I mean, the wall creates a divide, obviously, between the coastal beach and the top of Coastal Bank. It's been there forever. It's not going away. While I think, of course, the mitigation on top is really important, I do think that the additional planting, which you're showing at the toe, and if the commissioners notice where you don't have plantings is where it already, native plantings already exist, and you don't need to fill that in. But this will create, we went out there today, you saw a dune essentially that's kind of formed, a low dune that's formed in front of this property. And I think that would enhance that. The bank itself on the top of the stone wall between the edge of lawn and the top of the rocks right now is, as Katrine said, a mix of natives, non-natives, and invasives, leaning more heavily towards the invasive side of things. So in my rectifying that, getting rid of the invasives and going native is a benefit. And also the property that's to the east that's getting redone, it'll also tie in, they removed invasives and are planting natives as well. So it'll create much more of a native top of Coastal Bank buffer strip along this stretch. In addition to removing 900 square feet of lawn. So I think cumulatively and other things such as getting the septic outside the 100-foot buffer, and I think that offers fair mitigation for the project, for the increase in square footage in the 50 to 100. And that area in the 50 to 100 currently now is just grass. As they had mentioned, there's really not a lot of vegetation other than grass and invasives on this property, with the exception of few hedge, type trees along the property lines. I mentioned in your summary, and hopefully the applicant would be amenable to trying this, even though you're doing some wonderful woody shrubs, which really don't exist on the lot right now. It's all low or herbaceous or invasive. And you're going to some nice larger size shrubs, which is good to see. I'm curious if you'd be willing to try a couple of small cedars, maybe not right at the top of the coastal bank, right where it's really exposed, but more along adjacent property lines where there too are doing some trees that might afford a little bit of protection. I think that might just push it over the edge a little bit. With the inclusion of, our typical conditions of any lawn is not to be sod, it's to be a native Cape Cod grass mix. That's the lawn. No irrigation, at least other than temp irrigation in the 0 to 50. If not the 50 to 100 as well. I don't know how the commission wants to go with irrigation, permanent irrigation in the 50 to 100. But I think with our typical conditions about no fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, other than a licensed applicator using it on the coastal bank to take care of things like bittersweet, which don't respond. They do best when taken care of with herbicides. think with conditions such like that and the mitigation proposed, I could recommend approval of the project.
Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, let's go through comments and questions from the commissioners, starting with Mark.
I have no comments, thank you.
All right, John.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're proposing removing 900 square feet of lawn, so the remaining, whatever it is, 1,500 square feet of mitigation is invasive removal and replacement with natives, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, combined, the invasive removal plus the lawn removal equals the 2,410 square feet.
Okay, so my only other question is about the American beach grass. Is that appropriate for the top of Coastal Bank? I thought, or am I confused, Amy? This is maybe a question for you, that American beach grass needed to be somewhere where blown sand could, or is that a different grass?
No, beach grass does benefit from wind-blown deposits, but they are finding that it can last a lot longer than previously thought, whether it's not getting the constant sand nourishment as well. So I think it would do okay.
So in the drawing where anyway the plantings, the shrubs are pretty sparse, and so the idea is in that mitigation area, most of the vegetation that's going to be installed is those two varieties of grasses. Is that correct?
Correct. And like Amy said, these are larger shrubs, so we wanted to, make sure that they had room to grow the bayberry, the beach plum. Over time, they're going to need more space. Okay. And we've planted beach grass in similar conditions along the top of the bank. You certainly wouldn't want to plant beach grass inland, but in this type of site where it's really exposed, especially in the winter, it'll do really well, where a lot of other species won't do well here because it's so exposed by wind.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
No.
Okay. Stan.
I have no comments.
All right, Carolyn. Still muted, Carolyn.
I think it looks great. I particularly like the increase in the vegetative buffer zone at the top of the bank. I like that a lot. That will keep little kids from tumbling down and falling into the protected area, such as we require on flatter pieces of property. I like the approach to nourish the beach grass on the beach. And I like the decrease in the 0 to 50. So I think you did a great job.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, I think the plan is looking pretty good. I would be supportive of trying to add a few more small cedars in addition to the shrubs already on the plan if possible. That's my comment.
All right, thanks, Ernie.
I think it was great. I have no comments. Thanks.
All right. So I guess I have a little different view on this proposal. I just get the feeling it doesn't go far enough to take advantage of the opportunity that's here. So I just feel like the movement out of the 50 is very minor. I don't think it's enough. And then I also have concerns about the mitigation. For me, invasive plant treatment I don't think it should qualify as mitigation. It's something that, the property owners would want to do anyways. And so that 900 feet of lawn removal, and I think about 1,500 feet towards invasive plant removal, which obviously has habitat benefits. But for me, I'd like to see that ratio get a little closer so you have an even amount of lawn removal as you have invasive plant removal. So those are my questions to see if is there any ability to move the structures back a little further, and is there any ability to even out that mitigation so you have more what I think is real mitigation on the property, which is removing lawn.
So can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So as far as shifting the house back, we're kind of pinched up against the septic system. We may be able to move it a foot or two, but we've got a 20-foot separation to the absorption system, 10 to the septic tank. And also we're right at the 10-foot separation to the garage, but we could take a look at that, and we can definitely speak with the applicant about trying to enhance the mitigation plantings as well as adding a couple of cedars. We will be looking to continue this till after the zoning board hearing, so we do have time to speak with the applicant.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you can just take a look at your square footage, and I mean, we don't have any requirement to mix things up this way, but you know, for me, I just think that you know, everybody wants to remove the invasive plants with or without a mitigation requirement. What I'd like to do is really try to improve the habitat in that 0 to 50. And I think by maybe getting the lawn replacement close to the half for the mitigation square footage, that would be really beneficial. So if you could bounce that off them, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay. Any comments from members of the audience? Any further comments or requests from commissioners for when they come back? Okay, when do you think you folks would like to come back?
2 weeks.
The
Okay.
16th.
All right. Well, then I move that we continue the hearing for 2 Quaison Lane, map 7, parcel A50 until December 16th.
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by Stan. We'll go through a roll call. All those in favor say aye, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Stan? Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. Okay, we'll see you back on the 16th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Amy, how you doing? You want to take a short break?
Okay. We can continue to plug. We got one more, right? One more, and then little things. So.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Next, we have a notice of intent for 28 Wawa-Tacey Road, map 6, parcel F1-12, proposed elevated walkway and landing. Looks like Mr. Burgess is here to represent.
I am, yes. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, been a long night, so I'll try to be brief on this one. So this is a proposed elevated walkway. I want to make it clear it's not a dock. And it's an alternative that was suggested some time ago. And I have several of these in Dennis. The basic concept of this is to provide safe access over vegetation and salt marsh to gain access to the beach. That's what the elevated walkway provides. The LeBlancs are avid paddlers. I've been in their garage, and I can tell you that even the racks that are proposed at the beginning of the walkway aren't enough to store all of the items they can paddle. Having said that, so the design of the walkway, it's 25 feet from the property line, which it needs to be. It's located so it reaches an existing path. It will go through a portion of a vegetated buffer. It crosses over lots of different kinds of vegetation, scrub, shrub, and herbaceous items. And then it goes over 51 feet of salt marsh. The pilings are spaced 23 feet apart, which is about the max that I can do. And the last piling is just seaward of the edge of the peat edge. And from there, we start down. So the idea is the stairs are straight out so that because you can't twist a kayak around a corner. So the stairs go straight out down to a platform. The concept here is that at high tide, the platform is just above high tide. So you can launch your kayak or paddleboard by standing on the landing. If it's a lower tide, you can keep the paddleboard on the landing, and then you walk down the stairs to the beach, and then you just pick up your paddleboard or kayak and walk out to wherever the water is. The beach here is pretty firm. You don't sink much. It was staked out, so you should be able to see the line of the walkway, and then there are 2 stakes that represent the seaward end of the 4x4 platform. The 4x4 platform is proposed to have grading on it because it will be subject to wave action. And the rest of the design is what's becoming a standard monopile design, wooden decking, 2x6 wooden decking, 4 feet wide with the handrail. There is a removable handrail in the section of where the paddle boards will be stored, and that's so that in the wintertime you can still have a proper handrail so people don't fall off the sides. Let's see, we have a file number. The project unanimously passed waterways on July 22nd. There was a shellfish survey done. There was 10 quahogs and 26 soft shell clams in about 4,500, I think 45 or 4,300 square feet. It works out to 0.008 shellfish per square foot. Let's see. Okay, and then at the end of the filing is a variance. A little interesting because by definition it's a water-dependent structure. It's not a dock, so it's different in certain instances of the variance. In this case, the variance can be granted because the alternative would be to walk through the marsh and drag all these crafts through the marsh, which would be really bad. So there are no other alternatives to get from point A to point B. So the walkway provides a benefit to the resource area by protecting it from pedestrian traffic. And we can talk about, well, we'll see where you guys go with the rest of that. Because it's not a dock, I'm not expecting shellfish mitigation. There's no shellfish in the area of the platform. And I'm certainly not expecting monitoring because this type of structure is an alternative to a dock. It's not going to have, it's not in the same league. It doesn't have the same potential for negative impacts. And Brad may disagree with me there, but I don't see any reason for this project to require shellfish mitigation or the ongoing monitoring like we've done with dock projects. So with that, I'll be brief and I'll attempt to answer questions.
All right, thanks. Amy, do you have a summary for us on this?
Sure, more comments and questions. I have a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
So, let's see. Originally, this was proposed to Waterways of the Harbor Master as potentially a dock, correct? But yes. It was not, it was because of navigation, it's kind of at that pinch point in Allen Harbor Channel. It was kind of determined to be too much of a hazard to navigation because you'd have to go out even farther to get to depth, correct?
Yeah, we looked at this because it's always an alternative to look at. If this was ever to be a dock, it needs to have dredging. The LeBlancs don't own a boat. They don't intend on owning a boat. So it just didn't seem reasonable to have to do all that for something they're not going to use.
Okay. All right. My question, so the entire structure is 101 feet long. 19 feet supposedly are beyond mean high water, or 19 are beyond mean high water. Mean high water is fairly easy to figure out. My question, who did the wetland delineation? Is it the same, is it BSC Group who did the shellfish survey?
No, Dan Croto, the surveyor, delineated out there.
Okay. So one of my things I think the commission should look a little bit closer at is the edge of marsh versus above. In the Allen Harbor area, mostly on the other side of the road, on the other side of the channel, it's you get a lot of this where you have mean high water and you have marsh, you know, what's clearly salt marsh, and then above it, it's a real mix of wetland and upland or marginal species there. So even though, so I think we need to, I would like to look a little bit closer about where that edge of marsh is, because right now it's, according to your plan, I think you're meaning it to say, now is the edge of marsh the blue line that's on your plan, or is the edge of Baccharis?
Just a second.
I guess it's just not real clear to me where on the plan landward edge of marsh really is.
I see the blue line you're talking about. And I see what you're talking about, yeah. So he's got the green as marsh, but then the blue goes to the label. So if I had to interpret the plan, I'd say that what he's thinking that the blue line is the edge of the marsh as he sees is how it meanders along the shoreline. And he's got the edge of the Baccharis. So
dominant, but then he goes to say above that, landward of that is Spartina patens, which is definitely a marsh grass, a salt marsh species, as well as spike grass. So, and then you start getting more into the weeds, if you will, of things that are a little bit more salt tolerant, you know, American beach grass, you're not going to find that in the salt marsh, beach plum, things like that. But I really can't tell where the edge of marsh is on this plan. And I would say that some of the indicators that seemingly he's showing as above the marsh, the Baccharis and the Spartina, are salt marsh species. And this comes into play because obviously one of the performance standards we have to look at are whether or not the proposed structure has an adverse impact to salt marsh. So we can't accurately or adequately say if it's going to have an impact if we don't know exactly where that line is. So I won't harp on that anymore, but I'd like some more clarity on that. And then Division of Marine Fisheries issued a letter. They have several recommendations that if this is to go forward that I would echo. Mark, we talked about this prior, so hopefully it's not a surprise, that the structure, if allowed, should be at least 1.5 times width of the structure. So if the structure is 4 feet wide, the structure at the bottom structural member, cross bracing, would be 6 feet off the marsh. Yours ranges anywhere from 4 and up. The site is mapped for coal hogs by the state and the town. The shellfish survey done by the BSC group did find coal hogs and soft shells seaward of the proposed staircase and landing for this. Currently, there's no structure there. That's where this one kind of differs from the one we were talking about just a little bit ago. And then, I mean, just down the road, we can chat about this if we get there, about whether a platform is really needed. Can it just be a set of stairs like we've seen before? Again, trying to minimize as much as we can disturbance to the intertidal area there. So I think I will stop there for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, let's go through questions from the commissioners and see how they feel. Mark?
I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
All right, John, you're up.
So just looking at the site plan here, where there's a grid shown labeled as shellfish grid with blue dots at the intersections of the transects, and those, are those meant to indicate where shellfish are found?
Yes.
Okay, so in the description of the survey, it says, well, it enumerates, what is it, 7 plots per transect and 5 plots, 5 transects, so that's 35 sample points.
Yes.
And with a total, it says, of 315 square feet. That means that over 35 sample plots, there was a total of 315 square feet across all the plots. So it's like, I don't know what that is, 8 square feet per plot?
Hold on.
Means?
I've got them around 6 by 8. They're about 8 feet. Well, the transects are about 8 feet apart, and then they go out in 5-foot increments.
They're digging up the whole area looking for shellfish?
No. No, each
What's
plot.
The area of each sample plot.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think they said it's 3 by 3. I can look in here.
9. Okay, so 9. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, that's where the 315 comes from. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Okay. So basically, less than 10% of the total area was sampled. So then you gave a density of shellfish. How did you get that density? I don't think it gives a density in here.
They don't know. I just add up the total square footage of the grid and divide it by the number of shellfish. That's all.
Well, I'd just like to point out that that doesn't make sense, Mark. Because you sampled less than 10% of the area. There's a lot of other shellfish there, presumably, so you can't state the density in that way. You've got to just take the square foot of the sample plot total and divide the number of shellfish by that, or divide that by the number of shellfish, not the whole survey area, because you didn't sample the whole survey.
Okay, fair enough.
So, that's a slightly misleading statement. I just like to point out, but I guess my other observation about that is that it seems to me there it isn't a few shellfish. You found quite a few shellfish in there, and I would. That's my point of view. This is clearly good shellfish habitat. I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. As the years go by, we're developing the science of both the sampling and the resolution of that data. So I understand the way I did simple math, but I agree with you. It's not representative of what's there. So I'll do it differently next time.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
All right, Stan, you're up.
Yeah, hi, Mark. To be honest, I didn't even focus on the shellfish survey because of the last one we did. My whole understanding of how these things are done and the measuring of the density, I didn't understand, and that's kind of what John was talking about. But I did look at it, and I can't believe that when you look at all the grids near the shore, there was nothing found there. But that's another issue. What I was really focusing on is, Amy alluded to the fact that the height over the salt marsh have an issue here with this dock, and just the length of the potential disturbance of the salt marsh. And the comment is that this would be more, a better way of doing it than letting people walk over the marsh with their boards and everything and kayaks. And I guess my question is, how have they been doing it in all this time? You said they're avid paddlers. They have everything out there in their garage, so they must be getting over there now.
I believe they're on the line. That's a question that they can answer, but admittedly, I don't see any evidence of them walking through the marsh now. They are avid conservationists as well, and they understand the whole reason for the project is that they understand that by walking through the marsh, it would be damaging to it. There is an area, I see Michael on the line now. There is an area to the south where the street comes close to the beach, but I'll let him answer that. Mike?
Yeah, what currently right now, just because we've been kind of sensitive to walking over it, we actually walk, and as I get older, this gets harder to do. We actually walk out our front walkway into the Wawa Tasty, take a right on a house point, and we go down an embankment right next to the Hooley's residence. So right now we kind of, I don't know, it's probably 100 yards or so, if not longer. And I just carry my boards there one at a time and go that way.
Okay. But that's all I have. Really, I guess my concern is for the salt marsh and the disturbance over there and the height of the proposed dock.
Yep, we can address that after we get through everybody. No problem.
That's all I have.
All right, okay. Thanks. Carolyn.
Do you leave your kayaks on the Fiddler's Landing little area there?
No. After every
up there.
Yeah, after every use, we actually our neighbors that are there, they actually have. If you've seen the pictures, they have a kayak rack themselves. The Hoolies. When we use it, we carry ours back and put them back in the garage. I have a racks in the garage that holds them.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the amount of shading over the salt marsh. And I'm concerned about the platform that'll hold the kayaks. And I'm looking at that as the equivalent of a float shading in the water. That platform, what is the dimensions of that platform? At the area where the kayaks will be stored.
Oh, you mean up towards the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, so the rack is open to the bottom. It's just a set of framing with three sets of stringers on it. So there's no decking underneath that.
But the boats shade.
The boats on top of each other would shade.
And
somewhat.
So what exactly is that over?
That is over some of the scrub shrub. According to the plan, it says mixed maritime shrubs, beach plum, rosa rugosa, cedar, etc. It's yeah.
Okay. So due to those two, I'm kind of a standstill. It seems strange, but it seems to this might be more disturbance than a little path through the down to the water. So I think I need an explanation why this is better than a little path through the area.
Okay, so do you want me to address that now or wait?
I would say let's come back to it because you might hear some nuances to that coming up. So, Jim, you're next.
Yeah, I've got some concerns with this one as to impacts to the salt marsh from both the poles going into the salt marsh and the shading, as well as impacts to the intertidal zone. Yeah, it's a really nice marsh, really quality habitat there, and it's kind of tough to degrade that at all. So that's my thoughts on it for now.
Thanks, Jim. Ernie?
Yeah, I think my questions have already been asked by most of the other commissioners. There's one, I think, a drafting area under your temporary impacts in the write-up mark. You're talking about dredging in there, which I assume is not part of this project, right? Okay.
That would be yeah, I apologize. What page is that on?
You don't have page numbers, so I can't help you with that, but it's under section 4, temporary impacts.
Oh, you mean what, in the notice?
It's part of the shellfish survey, I believe.
Oh, interesting.
Or, yeah. Or it's right after your conclusion of the shellfish survey.
Interesting. Okay. If the word dredging is in there at all, it shouldn't be in there. Same as if the word dock is in there at all, it shouldn't.
All right, so you just might want to fix that. And with respect to the rack, I mean, we're constantly presented with proposals that have 4-foot wide walkways, and then they bump them out to have racks somewhere along that walkway, which we consistently have turned down. So I don't see this as being any different. You know, the width of the walkway is 4 feet, and anything in excess of that shouldn't be allowed. So I don't see that we have much room to approve anything in the way of a kayak rack on this. In addition to the shading that Carolyn has mentioned as well. And on the shelf survey, I agree with what John had mentioned earlier too, that if you look at the 35 plots, and basically you found more than one shellfish for all 35 plots. So it's, from my perspective, there's pretty high density of shellfish in this particular area, and that's problematic to me, sort of prima facie for what's being proposed here. But those are just probably the major comments. I'm sure there are a lot of other ones, but you know, I'll defer to the other commissioners on their comments.
All right, thanks, Ernie. And I guess I'll just quickly follow up on the themes that Carolyn and Jim expressed about concerns over impacts to salt marsh. To me, it's a lot of structure over a really nice piece of salt marsh habitat. And it just seems to me that, you know, you're going to have impacts to salt marsh. You know, you can try to reduce them, but you're still going to have impacts. Therefore, you need a variance. And I just don't see, you know, the purpose, you know, as a water structure really warrants that. So I have large concerns over that. And I do think that, you know, just to walk out and maybe access, maybe you could get a kayak stand permitted. You know, it would be a structure in the 0 to 50, but it might be acceptable. And I can't see that foot traffic having the impact of such a large structure over the salt marsh. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, do you want me to respond now?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, as far as the height goes, the LeBlancs have been in contact with their neighbors. The neighbors all know what the intention is here. The reason it's 4 feet is specifically because those are the regulations that are in place now. And we've had this discussion many times, but they didn't even want to go to 5 feet high because of the potential visual impact to their neighbors. We thought about, I mean, if we went up another foot, that increased the cost a little bit by the length of the pile, and it makes a little bit longer set of stairs. It's not obscene, it's not huge, so going up a foot is doable, but there were clear reasons why we stayed at the 4 foot level, because the structures that are adjacent to this property are quite low, and they have this one look like a tower, you know, beyond that. It was something they were trying to avoid. The dock across the way at 19 Nons the end of it was lowered because of complaints that as it was initially designed, it was too high. We get into this conundrum from the division John Logan, and he suggests that the 1.5 to 1 ratio works, but he does say in his report that he really doesn't have a lot of data to support that because nobody's doing it. And we've had previous discussions with this on other projects. We talked about marsh mitigation and such. And I believe this commission said that a lot of the docks that are in the town right now, that they didn't see a lot of degradation from the dock itself, at least due to salt marsh. Okay, Stan, I know Stan's shaking his head. I can't be specific. I just remember that because we've had these discussions many times before. Certainly there can be instances when that can occur. So the other option is we could, right now is proposed the 2x6 decking. You know, we could go to grading, but to address the concern about height, that was specifically why the LeBlancs wanted to keep it low, was because of they wanted it to more match what was in the area, and you know, it's only a suggestion that we go higher. So specific reason why we did that, because you know me, I've done 5 feet just about everywhere that we've gone. We do have 5 feet at mean high water. It just comes back a little bit more when you get to the landward side. As far as the landing goes, you guys should remember that this concept was the alternative for the dock that's on Herring River, because those people didn't have a boat. And it was suggested to us, well, why don't we just do an elevated walkway and have a little platform on the beach? This is exactly that concept. So I'm not understanding why there's a lot of resistance to it. Certainly, if the marsh was only 20 feet wide, we'd only make it 20 feet long, but it is what it is. I didn't want a path through the herbaceous shrubs and things like that, because I was trying to treat it with the same importance as the marsh. Now, if I'm in error there and you want to have a path through there till we get to the edge of the marsh, I don't see any problem with that, but I'm trying to let you know what my thinking was. I kind of treated all vegetation equal in this instance. I can show you many instances where, as people walk through the marsh with foot traffic, and if they're carrying or dragging something, you know, you're going to have permanent damage. You're going to have a permanent path that gets reduced to mud, where you're going to get erosion in significant events, where those fines are going to come out of the marsh where they belong in the marsh. So I'm not a believer of trampling the marsh to get point A to point B, even though you can't really stop anybody from doing that. So these walkways, I've done probably a dozen of them. You know, these walkways are an alternative to the definite damage to the marsh that would come from pedestrian traffic. And the little bit of potential impact from a monopile pushing its way into the ground, there's only 2 piles that are in the marsh itself. I just don't see that as offsetting. I mean, I can't imagine those have the same impact that a full path through all of this vegetation would have. So I'm not really understanding that. The landing itself is 4 by 4, and it's 4 feet above the ground. So even if it was a float, it's a fixed float with its own float stops, if you will. And the landing's going to have grading because it will be subject to wave action. So the landing can be permanent. I'm not a believer of temporary structures, because the jetting and disturbance that you put in and out of the beach soil twice a year to take something in and put it out, I think causes more damage over time than just doing it once and leaving it there. So there should be adequate clearance under the landing. If you just had steps to the beach, I've done that before. I have 3 of these in Grand Cove and Dennis, and they've all kind of, each one evolved a little bit differently. And if you had stairs all the way to the beach with a railing, you imagine trying to carry a kayak down a set of stairs And then what do you do when you get to the water? It's going to be very difficult to pivot it 90 degrees so that you can put it in the water. Plus, you're only standing on a 1 foot wide step. So I think it becomes very dangerous to try to launch a kayak or a canoe or a paddleboard from a step. It would only be similar if the steps went all the way to the beach and you were doing it only at low tide when you're just taking the stairs all the way to the beach. So the platform is a practical and safe way of having a place to stand so you don't trip and fall holding something on the stairs. The kayak racks. We've had racks on the sides of docks forever. It was the platform at the end, the storage bench that the board didn't want because that made the dock effectively 6 feet wide. We have a lot of docks with the storage platform, but we've gotten away from that. But I haven't seen one without kayak racks, so I didn't think I was out of line. And like I said, I put them all the way at the beginning, so it has so that they're out of the way as much as possible. If you didn't like the kayak rack there, and you could see to put one in that, there's a blank area on the plan that says edge of grass. To the right of Shell Walkway, if you saw fit to put a rack there so that they can still grab them handily and then walk down the walkway, I think that's a very doable option. And I think that's the comments that I have from you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Any comments from members of the audience?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
May I? I want to echo, I'm not sure. I mean, if the commission doesn't feel the way I do, I respect that. I do think we need to know a little bit more clarity on the edge of marsh delineation to know exactly how much salt marsh we're going through.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we agree with that, Amy.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Any comments, members of the audience? Any further comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I just want to, this is Stan again. I just want to go back again. My concern, I kind of agree with Mark where these monopile piers do less damage than the standard construction. But I was concerned more with the salt marsh, the distance, going along with what Amy's question about how much salt marsh are we going over. And again, looking at the height, you said you're up to 5 feet at mean high water, but at the beginning of that dock, you're at like 4 feet from what I can see on the plan.
You're right. You're right.
And the comment about damage of shading, I mean, I see it all the time. I become very aware of that when I do my paddling along and I look at docks, and wherever there's a dock, there's a nice path underneath where there's no salt marsh. It just dies. So I disagree with that. So I think height, again, we don't have the statistical data, but higher the better is, in my opinion.
Mark, you were talking about, how adjacent structures are much lower and, unfortunately, aesthetics and stuff aren't, well, actually not unfortunately. Fortunately, aesthetics are not in our purview. I want no part of that. But just keep in mind too that a lot of those structures are a lot older. When standards were different, there wasn't a lot of understanding. A walkway just 2 or 3 houses down was the one we talked about just a few minutes ago at 10 Fiddlers. That was a permitted licensed structure for a walkway from a while ago that they changed the last piece to have a staircase down for access. But that one, it is pretty clear, we couldn't do anything about that now, but it is really low to the marsh, and you can see the definite impacts of shading of that walkway because it's so close to the marsh to to the marsh grass, and there is some dead space underneath there. So whether it's 5 feet, 6 feet, I think hopefully we can all agree that, you know, the old way of kind of doing things a lot closer to the marsh is not the best way to do it for the marsh. So.
Well, okay, so I would be interested in the board's opinion as to which, if what I could do is carry the elevation that's 5.5 feet back until it's 5 feet. And then at that point, I can put one step in so that the remainder of the landward portion is 5 feet instead of 4. So somewhere along that span, you would have a step, but I could keep the outer edge the same height and just step it up where I need to on the landward end. Would that help? Hello?
Well, Mark, I think that, you know, certainly 4 feet, you know, that study conducted by DMF to me shows significant impacts at 4 feet. So, you know, 4 feet's a non-starter for me. And,
okay.
And so if you go to 5 feet, you're gaining, but the study to me also indicates impacts at 5 feet, and they recommend 6 feet. So, you know, I think, you know, you've heard various opinions. For me, you just can't get away from impact with a structure this large over the salt marsh. So I have significant concerns. You know, clearly you'll reduce impacts going from 4 to 5. I still think it's a very large structure.
So what would you like to see, Brad, as far as that? If I go 6 feet at mean high water, that's only 6 inches at the outer end. That's where most people are concerned about what it looks like. So that's not terrible.
I'd rather see a footpath or just have access the water edge by walking out.
Really?
Yeah. When you were describing impacts from a footpath, I thought you were talking about the walkway. It sounded like you had interchanged to. I don't see you getting away from impacts of the salt marsh with a walkway here.
But think of the impact that you're getting if you're just walking on the marsh. You're ruining it, you know, a couple of foot wide, trampling it down where it never comes back. I'm not understanding how that is better than the walkway. And the walkway doesn't have 2 piles.
If you go down to this location, there is no path there right now. So my guess is that there's probably a reason for that. And you'll probably have infrequent use. You'll have seasonal use. So you're not going to mow it. You know, it's going to be just people walking through it. And the frequency of that traffic, the seasonal use, I think will be far less impact than having a large structure over there.
Okay, well, so what Michael LeBlanc was saying was that because they respect the marsh, they're not using it as an access right now. They're walking 100 yards or more to their neighbor's property. They're doing that out of respect. They're doing this proposed walkway out of respect for the marsh. But there's no regulation that prevents them from just walking through it. They choose not to because they don't want to damage it. They understand what the damage from foot traffic is going to be. I can't get it in my head that you would allow a trampled path through sensitive vegetation over a walkway that goes over it, even if we raise it up to satisfy DMF. You know, I don't understand that at all. The paths are horrible. That marsh never grows back. I see that you're saying that there's no path there now, but that's only because they've chosen not to use it. But as they get older, they're not going to walk.
It's a long distance. I don't think the frequency would be that high of traffic over that marsh.
Brad, may I comment, please, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
I mean, you know, Mark is right. Right now, I mean, I'm 59, I'm turning 60 in a couple of months, and that walk I can do now. And the reality is we're down there all summer long. I'm on the paddleboard, I would say, at least once a day. We do have guests that come down. So we have been making that walkway out of respect. And quite honestly, I can physically do it. That's winding down. So, you know, in the upcoming years, I'm going to be going straight down that path because that's going to be my only option, to be honest with you, sir. That is a fair amount of walk to get down to House Point. It's not, and I have to stop and rest. And
we have 4 boards.
And we have 4 boards. So it's not that easy to do, to be perfectly honest with you, sir.
Yeah, no, I understand your interest. Absolutely. I probably would share the same interest. I just think the walkway, 100-foot walkway over that salt marsh is a impact that, this commission shouldn't take lightly.
I respect that. I respect that, sir.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Brad?
Yep.
Amy, across the channel on the property where they referred to having taken down the dock a foot because everybody was complaining, didn't we approve a path through the brush to get to their dock? We
did. We approved. So again, we have to get back to what exactly is marsh and what gets into the upland vegetation. That might be an option to look at to reduce structure, is that in the upper areas where you currently are showing, or in the dry areas where you're currently showing walk or walkways, to potentially make that on the ground. We did that over on Nons Road. It was a little bit more dune-like vegetation there, even though it wasn't a coastal dune. It was more beach grass, heaths and heathers. It was a little drier, but similar. So that, we didn't, because that one would have been 200 and something feet long if it was a raised structure, and that would just be a no-go. So that is an option of maybe a hybrid approach or something like that as well. But yes, Carolyn, you're right. We did allow walking through area that was above the salt marsh. So if we find out where exactly salt marsh is, maybe that's an option here.
Okay, if the commission was amenable to that, we could look into that and shorten it up with a formal path to the edge of the marsh.
That would work.
Well, it would show us how much it will impact. That's the difference. And it may still be too much of an impact to be acceptable, but it at least will show us where it starts.
Okay, like I said, you knew my thought was I was treating all the vegetation the same. But that's fine. We can go back to look at. So I'll either get Dan out there or somebody else, and we'll re-verify where the edge of the marsh is. If there's a change, we'll revise the plan. What I could do is I can look at the heights, and I'd prefer to step it down so that the outer section is as low as possible. Like I said, even at 6 feet, it would only be 6 inches higher than it is now. I think visually everybody could live with that, but I don't want to go up until I have to on the back edge either. So I can look into that. What?
I'd love to come out with you if it's possible to coordinate three, Mark, myself, or you are Mark, Dan, Dan, yourself, and myself. When he looks at the wetland edge of marshland, I'd like to be there if possible.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
As you know, I'm a plant person. I like this stuff.
As you know, I'm not. I can do marsh.
I asked who did the delineation.
Yeah, that's why I rely on Dan. I don't do that. I don't have any problem delineating salt marsh, but beyond that, it's just green to me. And I'm happy to admit that. Okay, anything else?
When do you want to come back?
Well, I have a hearing in Sandwich on the 16th, which is why I missed the other walkway one tonight. I was actually in sort of Sandwich virtually for another hearing and then came back to you guys. So what is a month? You guys are still approving your hearings for next year.
Yeah, it's going to be the 6th, January 6th.
Hold on here, let me look.
Next meeting for us is the 16th of December, but I really like, we like to have plans and any revisions.
Yeah.
Roughly, the Thursday or so before to review. So that's kind of hard to do. You'd have to have it done in a week, and with tides and schedules, that probably won't work.
Not with my workload right now. If you didn't know how long the LeBlancs have been my clients, you'd probably be. Anyway, it's been a while.
When I talked to John Rendon, I said, I haven't seen them on the schedule in the past couple months. And they said, oh, they came to us in June or July. I said, oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah. Well, how many projects? I think I closed out more projects with you this year than I've presented.
Yeah. Life is busy.
Okay. So I'm trying to, I basically have 10 filings to do by the end of the year. So the one in Sandwich I have to do will be for January 6th. I can't.
The next date out is the 20th of January. But we could put you on the 6th and we can see where we're at. You could always ask for a continuance.
Well, it depends on where I am in the agendas too. We could try the 6th. I am going to be I do have 3 filings for you for the 20th. So we could just bunch everything on the 20th.
Whatever you and your client want to do. Whichever.
Well, we've been like 2 years getting to this point. So it would be easier for me to bunch everything together on the 20th with the other 3 that I'm going to have for you.
Make it a Mark Burgess evening.
Yeah. I have to do it that way because everybody, you and Sandwich meet the same, Dennis and Yarmouth meet on the same night, and it's really hard to be in 2 places at once. So let's go for the 20th then. That'll give us plenty of time to look at different options and change plans and everything.
All right then, so we'll continue to the 20th of January. I move that we do so for 28 Wawa Tacey Road, continue until January 20th, 2021. Have a second, please.
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Carolyn. All those in favor say aye on a roll, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. The motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry for a long night.
Thank you.
All right, Amy, how you doing?
Muted, Amy.
Muted.
All right.
All right, we'll get you out of here.
I said I'm all right. Once we stop the meeting, I'll give you an update on my shoulder. So.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we can get this fairly quickly. We've got the order coming up now for 46 Indian Trail. I've got a glitch with a Dropbox, Amy. For some reason, it'll only let me into a specific date that you link. And I don't know if it's a permission thing or what it is, but I just, every link you send me is just specific to one date and not the current date. So it could be with my permissions on this computer. But I'm sure
I can read through them real quickly if you want me to read through the special conditions. This was kind of one we talked about a lot, so.
Yeah, we did, but I trust everyone else, and yep. I think if folks can just speak up with their reviews. I think, the issues around, the fencing and all that hopefully is spelled out pretty well in the order.
I tried.
Yep, it was a little tricky.
Well, if they don't have comments on those, if you want me to read the specifics on that condition about the living fence, I can do that.
Yeah, please, that'd be great.
Okay, so I had to go back and look at the tape a little bit. Okay, so it's special condition number 11. The area outside the limit of work as shown on the site plan dated 10/27/2020 by Clark Engineering and outermost land survey is the area to be covered under conservation restriction. After the construction of the home, when the work limit can be removed, it is to be planted with native plantings to serve as a living fence to separate usable area around the home from the restricted area. Split rail fencing and or boulders may also be incorporated into this demarcation depending on condition of existing vegetation, grade, etc. This shall be determined by the applicant or applicant's representative in coordination with the conservation agent.
How's that sound, everybody?
I think that covers it.
Any other comments on the order?
I have a comment, Amy. I don't have it in front of me now, but did we get in there that the conservation restriction shall be filed before construction begins?
Let me look.
I think it says before any clearing of construction in the 100-foot wetland buffer zone.
Yeah, number 10 addresses that, Amy.
Okay, good. Yes, it does. Prior to the start of any clearing or construction, restrictions shall be prepared by the owner of the property, approved by the Conservation Commission, and recorded at the Barnstable Registry of Deeds. The owner may request that the Conservation Commission hold the restriction or have a nonprofit conservation entity such as the Harwich Conservation Trust agree to hold it, etc.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on the order? If not, does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move we approve the order conditions for 46 Indian Trail.
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by John. All those in favor say aye. Through roll call, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye. Excuse
Jim?
me.
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. Okay, motion carries. And then we've got a cert.
Yes, and the person is on the line in case you have any questions. It's for 20 Chase Street, and it was a tear down and rebuild of a home. They were really good with checking with me every time they had questions, slight, they had a couple of minor administrative changes. It didn't make sense that the back patios were connected to the house with a staircase, but then they had this like 2-foot gap between the house and the patio, and so the patios are basically shifted to be flush with the back of the house there. Also, there was some stepping stones. It just made sense, random stepping stones from the back of the patio area to where before their dock to the top of the slope there, just to really, keep people in a certain area and not to disturb anything else. The plants are doing pretty good. we can certainly condition as the ongoing conditions that the plants, if they don't make it, have to be replanted. My summary says the as-built did not reflect the little changes that were made administratively, but it currently now does. I put it in the engineer got it to me and I put it in your Dropbox. So what you have as the as-built now is what is on site. And I would recommend that you approve the cert of compliance with ongoing special conditions 8, 9, and 10. And I did not see any evidence of any, chemical or fertilizer treatment.
Mm-hmm. Any comments? All right, seeing none. Any questions, any comments? Otherwise, could someone please make a motion?
I'll make a move to approve the order of conditions for 22 Street.
Certificate of compliance.
Sorry. I'm looking at it exactly that and saying sorry.
It's late.
It's 10 o'clock.
Have a second, please.
I'll second.
All right, seconded by John. All those in favor say aye by roll call, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Brad Chase, aye. Okay, that is approved. Thank you for hanging in there so long. Right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Lauren.
All right, Amy, do you want to, what's your favor for taking care of a couple things?
Let's do we have to accept the 2021 meeting dates. We had a few fixes, not in regards to the meeting dates, but about filing deadlines. So we fixed those today. Brad, you and I chatted about it, and we can talk about it at starting the meetings at 6 instead of 6:30. Now that, Brad, you had, it was harder for you to make earlier times because of your commute to New Bedford, but now that we're not doing that, or probably not doing it as much for the foreseeable future, working from home, is it possible for us to meet a little earlier?
How do people feel?
Or other people who have time constraints, how does that work? Yeah.
Well, it's a tough commute for me from one room to the other, but I think I can do it.
Any objections? Amy threw out 5:30. I favored 6 a little bit because I'm still doing field work, and there'll be times I'm driving, from far away. So, but 6 seems real doable.
Can we do it for the whole year, or should it be for like the first 5 or 6 months, Brad? And then, because I have to post, well, actually, we don't technically. I really need to know at least a month in advance what time we're going to do for the papers and for whatnot, but.
I'm okay for the whole year because I just don't see things changing that dramatically, for about a year.
Yeah.
I've already been told to stay away from my laboratory through March.
Yeah.
So, how do other folks feel?
Are we doing this to end the meeting a half an hour early, or are we doing this for work?
That's a good question.
We are not allowed to go longer than we already do.
That means till 10:30 or 11 o'clock.
To add another half hour to our meetings is really tough.
Let's try not to.
I'm dreading January 20th already.
I know. I know.
So don't we normally work until we're done? And I don't see how changing the meeting time by half an hour changes any of that. I mean, maybe, whether or not we deal with minutes at the end of the meeting or something like that, but I don't see how that changes.
Mark, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I do. I kind of agree with what John said. I mean, I can probably get down to 6 o'clock more often than not. Later in the season, it's going to be very difficult. But over the winter, 6 is a manageable time. But I really don't see it being much different to pick up that half hour.
I just figured I'd throw it out there. If you want to keep it at 6:30, that's fine.
Well, if we want to cut down time, could we schedule an additional meeting more frequently to burn up some of the workload?
Potentially we could have some work sessions. It'd be harder to get additional hearings, even though we're doing things remotely. There's a lot of people doing remote meetings, so it takes a lot of coordination with staff to get that organized. But if we ever we could probably do work meetings, do small business a little bit more often, or discussion meetings, things like that. We could do where I don't have to put it in the paper necessarily. That's the other hard part, is getting it in the paper.
I recognize that, but I mean, if there was time allotted to clear up some of the other stuff that's hanging around, I mean, maybe that's a alternative.
I don't know what I'd rather do, meet like 3 times a month or just meet 2 times a month for a long time.
If we want to make the meeting shorter, we just start at 8 or 9.
That's right. That would work.
Amy, can we try it for before the daylight gets much longer, like for the next 6 months? Is that doable? And then, once the days get longer, they go back to 6:30. But I like the idea of not going to 30, not going to 11. Those are crushing when those nights happen.
Yeah, like
I think
tonight?
Our productivity goes down, and the next day can suffer. If I'm getting up at 5 in the morning. So,
how about starting in June, we'll go back to 6:30, but January, we'll do 6 o'clock.
Mark, is that going to cut things for you in May?
Well,
Yeah, no.
May, life changes. It starts.
Let's just keep it. It seems
How
more
about
helpful than it's worth.
How about April?
I could 1st of April I could live with.
Just switch over to 6:30, 1st of April.
That's like 3 months. Yeah.
We can try it.
I don't know if it's going to confuse applicants anymore, but oh well. You tell me what you want to
Hey, Amy, if that's going to confuse the applicants, we could always do minutes and things like that at the first half hour.
Iterations, let stuff play on rather than late. Get that out of the way, and then set the first hearing up for 6:30 at 6:45.
That work, Amy?
You want to try to meet early, at 6 for January, February, and March, and then go to 6:30 come April?
It was up to me. I'd start 6:30 April 1st, but
I would too.
You still won't have a lot of daylight April 1st, But
flashlight.
I know it's not easy for Amy staying here late either, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Well, you work too, so don't worry about me.
Yeah, I guess 3 months is really not that much of a benefit, Amy.
Yeah.
To switch back and forth like that. So
That's kind of how I feel.
All right, let's keep it 6:30.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. So we need to vote on the schedule all the same?
Yes, please. Vote to accept
so
the 2021 meeting dates.
Yeah, well, I move that we accept the 2021 meeting schedule. Could I have a second?
I second it.
All right, seconded by Stan, and we've got to do a roll call. You guys are getting sick of hearing this, but all those in favor say aye, starting with Mark.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye. Post St.
Jim?
Patrick's Day is not going to be much this year.
That's right. Ernie? Not the same, drinking alone. All right. You want to tackle some minutes, Amy, or is there any other new business?
Is anybody wanting to come out and do some work at Thompson's Field tomorrow?
Well, I already said I will.
I heard you.
My wife said I couldn't. My wife said I couldn't bring my chainsaw with me, though.
Yeah, and I can't let you use power tools.
I know, so I have my handsaw and my loppers in my car.
Loppers are honestly going to be your best friend tomorrow.
Yeah.
What time do you think?
Probably later in the morning. I gotta do grocery shopping first, so I'm usually done by 9:30.
You'll see Nikki out there then. I am not much use physically right now, so it'll be Nikki and Caroline. If anybody else wants to come have some fun and cut some stuff down.
What time are you starting, Amy?
Starting at 9 at the Route 39 entrance. We'll probably break for lunch and then come back at it in the afternoon.
Okay. I'll see if I can get down there.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be for long. It's just supposed to be kind of out tomorrow, so.
Yeah, I'll try to drag Liz along too.
Great.
She gets bored.
Bring work gloves.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, that's all I have other than the minute. 2 sets of minutes.
All right, so let's go through the minutes quickly, and anyone has any comments, speak up. You want to give us an update on your health, Amy, once the meeting stops? Is that the idea?
It's not something I really want to talk about too publicly.
All right, we'll do that once we adjourn after the minutes.
You want to do July 15th first, Amy?
Yes, please.
I had 2 comments. One was on the 3rd page down at the bottom under the violation update.
Hold on 1 second. I'm on July 15th. 3rd page, you said?
Yeah.
Where are my pages?
No, I'm sorry. 4th page.
Okay. All right, yeah.
Down at the bottom, the next to last paragraph, we talk about the enforcement from Barrett Council.
Yeah.
And you reference that property in here, but you don't identify what the property is. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I assume that was Locker.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be from King. But it doesn't.
You can just change the lead and say.
No, it's not. It's not Lothrop. It's 422 Main Street.
Okay, you just might want to reference. I mean, it's not clear on that.
No, I'm.
Okay. Are you ready, Amy?
Not yet. Go ahead.
What's that? Under 2261 of the Bay Road, 3rd paragraph.
Oh, hold on. I gotta get there. Okay.
3rd paragraph, 4th line, where it says, the previous sentence says, David confirms that the numbers on the site plan are numbers for zoning and only include the buildings. Instead, the commission, I think that verb should, not would. Look, the commission should look at the full hardscape coverage calculations.
Okay.
Okay, under permit.
Hold on 1 second. I gotta change that. Should permakey what? Okay.
6. Under permit, third paragraph, 6th line. It says Ernie Crabtree, but where does it say? But instead to decide the whether or not. Eliminate the. Just the commission.
Yeah, I got it.
To decide. And then under Dunes Road. I have to get down to that. Dunes Road violation, line 3.
Wait a minute, I'm not finding Dunes Road violation.
Violations.
Okay, got it.
Okay, line 3 says, but the homeowners wants to plant now. And make one of them singular, whichever, I don't care.
Yep.
That's all I have for that one.
Okay.
An aside, it has nothing to do with, well, it does have something to do with the minutes. You reminded me, would you have an update in here on the Robbins Pond site visit? At that point, could you give us an update on how that is? If there's still been, the off-roading going on back there? You don't have to do it tonight.
Got a lot better. I think mostly because of the season, but we did do some measures in there, and now that we have the CPC funds, I've been, I priced out a certain gate, and I'm just making sure that DPW is still, they're willing to do the install on that, which they seem to be. So we'll be ordering those 2 gates very shortly. To install at either end, so that'll help prevent people from going in. Not necessarily, sorry, that's my refrigerator, my brand new refrigerator that's making noises. Anyway, we'll be doing that shortly, but it seems to have gotten better. I've been taking more trips through there. The police have too.
Okay.
Yeah, anything else on the minutes from July 15th?
I'm good for that date.
Do you want to, so if we can go to the minutes of August 5th and then do one vote together?
Yeah, let's do that.
Hold on, let me close out of that, open to this.
Amy, when you get to the bottom of page 4 on the August minutes, I don't know what's going on. It's like I got a 5950 highlighted, and then it talks about, mill points.
So yeah, Melissa was rushing to get these done. So that was probably her patient herself about what time to start her video back up again.
My point from everything after that, I can't see that anything was voted or discussed.
No, not finished. I am very sorry about that. I thought they were, I did not look. They were, and I've just been scrambling the past few days and I did not check that. So let's do those next meeting. Sorry about that.
No problem. Then it shows October, but I don't have October in my lockbox.
No, that's not, that one's not ready yet. Sometimes when I make the agenda, it's like wishful thinking that we're gonna get that far, but we did not get that far, so.
I think 2 sets of minutes are adequate for each meeting.
We're getting there. Melissa did a great job of catching us up and, you know, making it seamless for Nikki to come back. And so. All right. So you want to vote on the July 15th minutes?
Okay. I motion that we approve both sets of minutes.
No. Just July.
Oh, just July. Okay, just July.
Okay, I'll second it.
Thanks, John. All right, all those in favor say aye, starting with Mark. John?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim? Still with us, Jim? I don't blame you.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Aye.
Okay, Ernie?
Yeah, aye.
And myself, aye. All right, that carries. Anything else?
No, just.
I
I just have a couple of comments, if I might. You know, just nothing to debate at this point. But I've been, Brad, I sent you and Amy some pictures of some floats sitting on the water on the riverbed. It was my last email I sent out talking about my last trip looking for floats.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very noticeable. It's something to consider for when we talk about floats and docks later on. And the other thing I was questioning today about what was the timeline for floats in the water, because there's still a lot out there.
Yeah.
And it's already December, so that's all I want to comment. No questioning or conversation at this point. Just wanted to mention it.
I'd like to mention one FYI too, if just take one moment, which is there was a significant algae bloom in Skinnequit Pond the day before Thanksgiving, which is highly unusual.
Yeah, it's a growing trend. Not good. Stan, thank you for your diligence with that topic. You've been on it, and I think you've really, been out there looking, and I really appreciate that.
And I don't think I'll be out anymore this year. It's getting cold.
Well, I think it's a real issue, and it's one of the more avoidable impacts I've seen in my time in this commission is people leaving those things on salt marsh. And it just impacts the resource area that's completely avoidable.
Well, this last one, like I said, I didn't know if you got to open it, but I was there at very low tide, and I had two real good examples where floats sit on the riverbed now.
Yeah, okay. I haven't looked at it yet, but I will, so thank you.
Okay.
All right, anything else, folks? Well, I move to adjourn tonight.
I'll second.
Seconded by Carolyn. All those in favor say aye. Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase. All right, we are officially adjourned.